100 memory theories that will unsettle you to fall asleep to. What if you never actually lived the life you remember? What if your happiest day never happened? What if the face you love the most is a mental edit? Tonight, we will not chase truth. We will drift into the uncertainty of memory. Because memory is not a vault, it's a river, changing, bending, sometimes disappearing beneath the surface. Scientists call it neuroplasticity. Philosophers call it illusion. You just call it me. In this quiet journey, you'll wander through 100 unsettling theories, some rooted in quantum physics, others whispered by ancient mystics. You'll meet ideas that say your mind is just a simulation, that your childhood may have been rewritten in your sleep, that even forgetting is a form of protection. But don't worry, there's no need to understand everything. Just breathe, lie back, and let the mysteries of your mind unfold like a dream you've already forgotten. The mirror that remembers. It starts so softly you barely notice. A memory drifts in, not summoned, just there. Maybe it's the smell of coffee from your grandmother's kitchen, or the way a particular evening light makes your heart ache for a face you can't name. You feel it before you think it. That's the mirror. But this mirror does not reflect perfectly. It ripples, and each time you gaze into it, hoping to find the same version of yourself, something has shifted. Just a little. The color, the edge, the emotion. I swear the walls were blue in that apartment. One voice says. No, another answers gently. They were always green. Your mom even hated them. And just like that, the image cracks, quietly. You start to wonder, is the truth in the picture or in the feeling it leaves behind? Neuroscience has offered its own riddle. Each time you recall a memory, you don't pluck it out from a secure vault. You paint it anew. Every detail reshaped by the mood you're in, the story you've told since, or the silence you've carried. It's called reconsolidation, the quiet remodeling of the past. What you retrieve is not what once was, but what your present allows it to be. It's like returning to an old journal, only to realize you wrote in someone else's hand. The words are yours, but the meaning now wears different clothes. You're no longer the person who lived it, just the one remembering it, or revising it. Two friends sit on a bench, trading fragments of childhood like seashells. Remember when we used to race down that hill near the fire hydrant? You mean the one where you fell and cried for 10 minutes? No, I didn't cry. That was you. A pause, a smile, a shared shrug. Maybe both are wrong, maybe neither. But the memory remains, altered yet whole. And here lies the gentle ache. If memory changes each time we touch it, what is the self made of? Are we a fixed sculpture, or a swirl of impressions and edits? Are we the sum of the stories we keep telling, knowing they are stitched together from yesterday's feelings, today's bias, and tomorrow's longing? It's a strange comfort, isn't it? To think that you are not trapped in what was, but floating through what could be. That identity is less like a stone in your hand, and more like water in your palm, cool, shifting, impossible to grip, yet always yours. So if your memories are paintings, then you are both the artist and the observer, a canvas in progress, never quite finished. And maybe that's the point. You ever get the sense that the way you remember something says more about who you are now than who you were then? A woman asks, half awake. The man beside her, staring at the ceiling, replies, all the time. It's like time edits us, one recall at a time. They fall into silence, a thoughtful, soft kind of quiet. And now, so can you. Because if memory bends with time, what happens when time itself bends back? When memory no longer leads you into the past, but into something stranger, more fluid? We'll drift into that next. But for now, let the mirror soften. Let the ripples fade. You're not wrong. You're simply still becoming. The future memory illusion. Have you ever paused mid-step, heart slightly racing, because something, somewhere, felt oddly familiar before it ever happened? A dream you swore was just imagination suddenly aligns perfectly with a moment in real life. Or maybe a word, a glance, a setting flickers across your mind before reality catches up, like déjà vu with sharper teeth. These are moments that make you wonder, did I just remember the future? What you've experienced might be what some call precognitive memory, a mysterious phenomenon where the mind seems to register events before they've actually occurred. Science, ever grounded in the measurable and repeatable, usually dismisses such experiences as coincidence or false memory. But quantum theory, always the rule breaker, whispers a more radical possibility. What if time isn't a line, but a web? According to certain quantum interpretations, the past, present, and future may all exist at once, layered like transparent sheets of reality. In rare moments, your brain may briefly tune into another layer, not by magic, but by the nature of consciousness itself being entangled in time. Think of your mind like an old radio. Most days, you're tuned to the frequency called now, but occasionally, a strange interference cuts in, a transmission from what hasn't happened yet. It doesn't come with a warning or timestamp, just a feeling, a sharp flash, a dream that refuses to fade, an emotion that makes no sense, until it does. Maybe you dream of rain and wake to clear skies. But days later, the same rain falls, in the same rhythm, with the same crow cawing outside the window, and you freeze, wondering if time just looped back and whispered a secret in your sleep. But here's the twist. Maybe the brain isn't seeing the future, but predicting it with such precision that it feels remembered. Your subconscious is a supercomputer, constantly absorbing fragments, patterns, body language, emotional currents, visual cues. It stitches them together into stories that sometimes come true. Not because you're psychic, but because your brain is an incredible pattern finder, a master of quiet logic. So when it paints a future that unfolds just right, it's easy to mistake pattern for prophecy. Still, we can't ignore how real it feels when it happens. These glimpses have an eerie clarity, as though they're pulled from a memory instead of a guess. They often carry emotion, longing, fear, peace, as if our future selves are sending feelings back as breadcrumbs. Some researchers even suggest that our brain's time perception is more flexible than we know, bending slightly in moments of altered consciousness, deep sleep, meditation, trauma, or awe. One night, as two friends lie on their backs beneath a blanket of stars, the younger asks, "Have you ever dreamed something before it happened?" The elder nods slowly. "Yes. Once I dreamed of losing someone, weeks before it came true. I didn't believe it until the day came and everything unfolded just like the dream. I still wonder if I saw the future, or if I just knew something I wasn't ready to admit." The younger turns to the sky in silence, heart heavy with the thought that perhaps time isn't a wall, it's a veil. If memory can stretch forward, not just backward, then everything we know about identity shifts. Who are we, if not the sum of our memories? And if some of those memories haven't happened yet, are we partly built from futures we haven't lived? So the next time you get that flicker, that sudden certainty that something already happened though it clearly hasn't. Don't dismiss it too quickly. Maybe it's a trick of the mind. Or maybe, just maybe, your consciousness brushed against another timeline. And if the future can echo backward, what happens when the present is rewritten by someone else? Let's gently open the next door. The memory wars. The implanted past. There's a particular kind of silence that only happens late at night, the one that settles between your ears rather than around you. It's in that hush, where memory often replays itself like a flickering film strip. And sometimes, the film lies. A quiet question lingers just beneath your pillow. What if some of your most cherished memories never happened? Not in a metaphorical way, not a dream mistaken for a moment, but fully constructed, like a story whispered into your mind while it was half asleep, and accepted, unquestioned. I remember it so clearly, one man said to a woman across a coffee table, the steam curling between them like a boundary. The red balloon, the hill, my dad holding the string. She listened, not doubting, not correcting, just letting the warmth of the memory stay. But there never was a balloon, only a suggestion planted in a study. A psychologist's voice, gentle and practiced, had asked, "Do you remember that time you got lost at the mall?" And by the third session, the memory had shape, smell, sound, emotion. This is not science fiction. It's science, studied and replicated in controlled environments. Participants were told stories of events that never occurred, and the brain, loyal to narrative, filled in the gaps, not out of deception, but out of need. The mind wants coherence. It wants meaning. And it's astonishingly good at improvisation. A man once walked into a courtroom, trembling as he pointed to the person he thought had assaulted him. His voice cracked, his recollection unwavering. But years later, footage proved he had remembered wrong. The real perpetrator was someone else entirely, and yet, he still felt the memory. It was stitched into him. Can you trust your own past if it can be revised by a stranger's suggestion? If someone can insert a falsehood so seamlessly that it becomes a thread in the tapestry of your identity? Sometimes, even trauma therapists encounter this puzzle. Was the pain remembered or created? Did the memory resurface, or was it shaped? Healing becomes a mirror maze where truth and imagination wear the same face. A soft voice in the dark once said, "I think I remember why I stopped talking to her, but I'm not sure anymore." And maybe that's the scariest part. Not that memories can be fake, but that they can be felt so deeply, even when they're false. Because emotion doesn't check for evidence. It simply reacts. And what does that mean for love? For regret? For forgiveness? When you replay that childhood bike ride, when you remember the smell of rain at your first heartbreak, how much of it belongs to reality? And how much was patched in by time and suggestion? It doesn't mean your memories are meaningless. It means they're alive, fluid, sometimes shaped by hands you didn't see. As your breathing slows and the weight of sleep begins to tug at the edges of your thoughts, hold this gently. The mind does not lie out of malice. It lies to protect, to belong, to understand. And if it can create memories that never were, could it just as easily erase the ones that were? Let's drift further now, into the soft shadows of memory erasure. No need to hold tightly. The truth, or what's left of it, will still be here when you wake. The vanishing mind trick. Have you ever wished you could just press delete on a moment, wipe it from your memory as easily as closing a browser tab? That argument, that betrayal, that loss. The human mind, while remarkable, sometimes holds on too tightly to what hurts us most. In trauma therapy, techniques like EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, have helped people reprocess their past by disrupting the way memories are stored. It's a bit like walking back into the same dark room, but this time with the lights on. During those moments when the brain is in a heightened or altered state, a painful memory is reopened and softened before it is stored again. But deeper in the margins of neuroscience, things take a more unsettling turn. Researchers have explored the possibility of erasing memories, not just reprocessing them. Through precise electrical stimulation or experimental pharmacological agents, some believe it's possible to block the proteins necessary for memory reconsolidation altogether. In theory, this means a memory could vanish permanently, like a chalk line washed away by rain. Would you do it? Someone whispers in the dark. I don't know, the other replies softly. If it meant forgetting the night my brother died, maybe. But what else would I lose along with it? Because here's the haunting part. Memory isn't just data stored in a vault. It's not cleanly labeled and filed. It weaves into identity. It tangles with emotion, with instinct, with growth. When we try to surgically remove the pain, we might also pull out the roots of resilience. A heartbreak, as unbearable as it is, teaches us who we are when love is lost. Guilt can shape morality. Grief can deepen our compassion. So what happens if we erase the very moments that shaped us? Do we become softer or emptier, more peaceful or less real? As one mind asks, if I no longer remember my mistakes, who's left to grow from them? The other smiles gently. Maybe forgetting is easier, but healing is stronger. The deeper paradox is this. Forgetting is not just a passive loss. It can be engineered. It can be a choice. But like any choice, it reshapes the future. And maybe, when we start deciding what to forget, we're also choosing what parts of our story we no longer want to tell. And yet, what if forgetting doesn't need trauma or machines? What if memory can fade simply because we repeat something too often? Let's now step into the paradox of routine, the quiet erosion of meaning through endless repetition. The familiarity fade. You don't notice the hum of the refrigerator until it stops. And maybe that's how it works with everything we love. The warmth of a hand we've held for years, the smell of the hallway we pass each morning, the sound of our own voice in a partner's name. Have you always had that little scar by your eyebrow? I think so. Maybe since high school? And then comes the pause, a quiet, shared uncertainty. The habituation theory tells us that the brain is built to survive, not to marvel. It learns, over time, to filter what stays the same. It saves its energy for change, alerts, alarms, and anomalies. And so, what once struck us as magical becomes muted. There's a certain heartbreak in that. Not the sharp kind that stings, but the soft, dull ache of distance that forms without leaving. He once whispered poetry in your ear. Now he says, "Did you feed the cat?" She once looked at you like you held the stars. Now she says, "Don't forget the dry cleaning." But nothing's wrong. And that's what makes it harder. This isn't forgetting by force. It's erosion by routine. You sit in the same chair each evening, not because you love it, but because your body no longer questions where comfort lives. Did we eat this yesterday? Maybe. Or last week? And you both shrug, laughing, but a little nervously. Because the days are starting to echo. Memory needs novelty to stay sharp, and repetition, though comforting, is the enemy of detail. The more we walk the same path, the less we see its cracks. The flowers, the shadows, even the way the light hits the wall differently in spring. You used to stare at your ceiling fan and notice the wobble. Now you just fall asleep to its hum, unaware it spins at all. This is the paradox of familiarity. We think we know what we see every day, but in truth, we only carry sketches, outlines, echoes, the scent of something we once held fully. And in that quiet forgetting, even love risks becoming a room we no longer explore. We don't mean to ignore the ones we cherish. We simply grow blind to what never leaves. Still, that doesn't mean all is lost, because sometimes, just sometimes, someone surprises you. You glance over during dinner, and their laugh catches you off guard, and for a brief, electric second, you see them again. Wait, when did you start smiling like that? I've always smiled like this. You're just noticing. And maybe they're right. Sleep may be approaching now. And that's okay. Let the routine of breath become your rhythm. Because next, we'll wander into the places routine cannot erase, where pain carves deep and the mind cannot look away. Close your eyes. We're entering the territory of scars. The burned-in wound. Some memories do not dim with time. They burn. Like a flare that refuses to fade, they remain lodged inside the folds of your mind, vivid, sharp, and involuntary. These aren't just memories, they're wounds. And like wounds, they ache when touched, throb in silence, and sometimes reopen when you least expect it. Why do I still feel it, even after all these years? A woman whispers to her husband one quiet night, staring at the ceiling while the fan hums overhead. He turns slowly, unsure if it's a question meant for him or the past itself. I don't know, he replies, voice hushed. Maybe because it never had a chance to heal. Science tells us that the amygdala, the brain's threat detector, plays a special role in storing emotionally charged memories. When we experience trauma, the amygdala lights up like a siren, sending a signal to the hippocampus to imprint that moment in high definition. Unlike a birthday party or a summer vacation, traumatic memories are encoded in a way that resists decay. They are rehearsed not with fondness, but with fear. The paradox is haunting. The things we most wish to forget are the ones most stubborn to leave. It's as if the brain mistakes pain for priority, holding on as a survival mechanism. But survival sometimes feels like punishment. Have you ever caught yourself reliving a moment you never chose to remember? Not as a flashback, but as a sensation, a smell, a sound, a tightening in your chest. The wound doesn't announce itself. It breathes beneath your calm like a second heartbeat. A young man once described it like this: "It's not that I remember what happened. It's that I feel it again, every time I see something that reminds me. A voice, a place, a tone. I hate that it controls me, even when I think I've moved on." The truth is, pain and memory are deeply entangled. Emotional injuries, unlike physical ones, don't scab and peel away. They linger, reshaping the way you respond to the world. They teach you fear where there was once curiosity. They build walls where you once built bridges. Therapies like EMDR and somatic reprocessing attempt to rewire this relationship, softening the link between memory and pain. But healing is rarely clean. To heal, you must revisit. To revisit, you must feel. And in feeling, you risk reopening. "Is it ever gone?" the woman asks again, this time with tears in her voice. "No," he answers, "but maybe we can learn how to hold it differently." Maybe that's what healing is, not the erasure of the burned-in wound, but the gentle act of surrounding it with something new. A memory can be a scar, yes, but scars can remind us that we survived, that we carried pain through the dark and somehow still woke up to the morning. And yet, not all memories feel like they belong to us at all. As we move forward in this midnight meditation, we open a strange door, the one that leads beyond your own life. Let's step quietly now into the realm of ancestral memory. The memory of blood. The wind doesn't remember your name, but your blood might. There are stories your cells have rehearsed before you ever spoke your first word. A tremor in the hand when nothing is wrong. A sudden tightness in the chest when stepping into a silent room. Some part of you reacts before you understand why. That's not intuition. It's memory, older than you, hidden in the folds of your DNA like dust inside an old coat's lining. A man sits beside a woman at the laundromat, folding his shirts with precise, mechanical care. "Do you ever get scared?" he asks. "For no reason." She pauses, a sock half folded. "All the time," she says, "and I've never known where it comes from." They both nod, as if they've recognized a common ghost. Epigenetics, the science of echoes in our genes, suggests that trauma leaves chemical bookmarks on strands of DNA. These aren't changes to the code itself, but the way the code is read. Think of it like a piano. The keys are the same, but the sheet music has been annotated in red ink. Stress hormones written into the margins. A legacy passed down not through bedtime stories, but through cortisol and silence. Children of Holocaust survivors, famine victims, war refugees, they often startle faster, carry heavier fear, and grieve with no clear reason. No bombs ever fell in their lifetime, and yet something inside them still flinches when there's thunder. So, we ask, are all your fears truly yours? Or are you reciting verses from someone else's unfinished poem? And if that's true, what is identity but a borrowed story, a cathedral of layered voices? You are not one self, but many selves stitched together across time. Maybe that explains the moments when your emotions seem out of scale, when your sorrow feels disproportionate to the day. Maybe that's not just you. Maybe it's your grandmother crying through your lungs. A barista looks up as the lights flicker from a passing storm. "That reminds me of something," he says to no one. "But I don't know what." A customer replies without looking up. "Maybe it's not your memory." Silence hangs, warm and uncanny. The idea of genetic memory redefines how we view healing. Therapy might not just be personal, it could be ancestral. When you soothe your panic, maybe you're also calming someone long buried who never had the words. You're not just breaking a cycle, you're ending a century of whispers. And that brings us to a new question. If pain can travel through blood, could hope do the same? Could the dream your grandfather carried in secret now live in your fingertips? Could a distant ancestor's silent wish for peace be the reason you crave quiet? Let's move gently into that paradox, where ambition isn't invented, but inherited, where someone else's dream becomes your first instinct. Let's drift toward the next idea, the paradox of borrowed ambition. And if sleep takes you before we get there, that's okay. The memory will wait. The borrowed dream. It starts with a whisper, a small voice not your own, but close enough that you never questioned it. Maybe it sounded like a mother's pride wrapped around the sentence, "You're going to be someone great." Or a father's silence, heavy with the dreams he buried, passed down like unfinished symphonies for you to complete. And as the years unfolded, you followed that voice, not because you chose to, but because it had already been chosen for you. Do you ever feel like you're chasing something, but you don't know why? Every day, it's like the dream is real, but it doesn't fit me. There's a quiet sorrow in realizing that your deepest ambition might not be yours at all, that the longing you carry might be an echo picked up from the way your older sister spoke of being a dancer, but gave it up for something safer, or from the way your culture praises certain paths, doctor, lawyer, engineer, as if worth were found only in titles, not in truth. Memory is not just a storage room for your experiences. It is a sponge, and it soaks up emotional color from the world around you. This is the danger of emotional osmosis. When you grow up swimming in someone else's dreams, your skin starts to smell like them. You feel the urgency, the fire, the hunger, but it isn't rooted in your own soil. It grows sideways, toward the sunlight of approval. You remember the pride in someone's eyes when you first said you wanted to follow a dream they admired, and you mistook their joy for your compass. Years pass, and that dream becomes your identity. Until one quiet night, you sit on your bed and wonder, what if this was never mine? If you could choose again from scratch, no one watching, what would you want? I don't know, and that scares me more than anything. The implications run deep, because if your central goal in life was never chosen by your inner voice, then who are you really? Are you a collage of expectations, a patchwork of borrowed desires? The truth is, many of us are walking through lives that feel familiar but not intimate, like living in a house built on someone else's blueprint. And we only realize it when the rooms feel too small, or the walls echo with someone else's name. To wake up from the borrowed dream requires courage. It demands that you unhook your worth from the praise of others and listen, really listen, to the soft murmur of your own longing beneath the noise. That voice might be rusty. It may stutter, but it is yours. And remembering what you truly wanted might only begin once you forget who you tried so hard to impress. And still, the dreams we inherited leave marks. Even if they were never ours, they shaped our path, our posture, our pulse. Letting them go doesn't mean erasing them. It means releasing the parts of them that don't serve us. Because a dream, even if borrowed, still teaches us something about desire, about the ache to become, about the cost of silence. But what happens when those inherited ambitions dissolve, not just from memory, but from data itself? What happens when our personal dreams vanish into a digital blur of constant input? Let's drift next into a world where memory isn't stolen, but drowned. Welcome to digital drowning. The clouded mind. There's a soft humming that fills modern life now. Not quite a sound, but a presence. The quiet buzz of knowing that every forgotten name, every misplaced address, every quote half remembered, is just one tap away. And in that convenience, something quietly begins to dissolve. We used to press memories into ourselves like seeds into soil, turning them over again and again until they took root. Now we bookmark, screenshot, sync, and scroll. The effort of remembering has been outsourced. This phenomenon has a name: digital amnesia, a new kind of forgetting, not born of trauma or aging, but of delegation. When we trust our phones more than our own minds, we stop giving memory reasons to stay. A man on the train, eyes fixed on the window, asks his companion without turning his head, "Do you remember your old phone numbers?" She smiles. "I used to. I think I needed them more." He nods slowly, as if realizing he's forgotten more than just numbers. What we don't encode, we don't retrieve. Memory isn't a file, it's a ritual, a dance between the present and the past, where we rehearse, retell, relive. But that dance fades when we trust the cloud to remember for us. Why commit a recipe to heart when Pinterest will hold it? Why hold a friend's birthday in your mind when a calendar will remind you with confetti? And slowly, without fanfare, our mind shifts shape. Not a rich forest of connections, but a hallway of hyperlinks. Instead of feeling knowledge ripen within, we merely know where to find it. That's the subtle tragedy. To know everything, but understand nothing. To possess infinite access, and yet feel hollow. A woman in a coffee shop leans toward a stranger, curious. Do you think we still own thoughts, or just rent them now? He sets down his phone, half laughing. Rent, and sometimes the signal drops. In this new architecture of remembering, we lose rehearsal. And rehearsal is where memory deepens, where meaning becomes muscle, where a name stops being data and starts being a person again. We may believe we're getting smarter, faster, freer, but what happens when the internet goes dark? What happens when we realize we've spent years curating a second brain only to forget how to use the first? This isn't a warning, it's a whisper, a gentle tap on the glass. Memory thrives not when it's stored, but when it's stirred. And in a world obsessed with instant retrieval, the art of slow remembering may be our last sanctuary. There's no need to panic. If you're already drifting, that's all right. You can always return. The thoughts will wait. And yet, a question lingers. If our minds can forget because of technology, could they also remember because of it? Could machines someday whisper memories we never had? Let's follow that trail into the eerie domain of artificial memory. The synthetic past. Have you ever remembered something so vividly? An afternoon walk through a childhood forest, the feel of sunlight flickering through leaves, the voice of someone you once loved, only to realize it never happened? Not in this life, not in this world. Today's science isn't just decoding memory, it's beginning to fabricate it. In labs across the globe, neuroscientists and virtual reality pioneers are engineering memories not from lived moments, but from code. With the right sequence of visual cues, auditory design, and emotional prompts, the brain accepts these crafted experiences as truth. And why wouldn't it? The mind isn't a courtroom demanding evidence. It's a theater craving immersion. I cried during that VR scene, says a woman in her 30s, removing her headset. Her friend, sipping tea nearby, raises an eyebrow. But it wasn't real. It felt real, she replies. That was enough. And that's the fracture line. If a memory is felt, does it matter that it was never lived? Traditional thinking says no. It must be rooted in reality. But the brain, it seems, disagrees. Studies show that emotional intensity cements memory more strongly than chronological truth. In trauma therapy, artificial memories of healing scenarios are now used to overwrite scars from real pain. Veterans relive alternate endings, and patients visualize conversations with lost loved ones. Healing follows, relief grows. But did the event ever exist? What we remember, whether joy or sorrow, is less about what happened and more about how we felt when it did, or seemed to. The synthetic past doesn't just fool the brain, it soothes it, rewrites it, sometimes saves it. But it also raises an eerie question. How do we tell the difference between what we experienced and what was planted? You might one day look back on a birthday that shifted your life's direction, a beach that reawakened your soul, a stranger who said something that broke your numbness. And yet, none of it might be traceable. No ticket stub, no digital footprint, just memory. A phantom living in the corridors of your neural architecture. Do you remember that trip we took to Iceland? Wait, We've never been to Iceland. Are you sure? The waterfall, the hotel with the spiral staircase. A pause, then silence, then doubt. I mean, it feels real. This is not science fiction. It's emerging therapy, immersive entertainment, and, in some corners, a philosophical revolution. If happiness can be manufactured, if closure can be installed, who gets to define authenticity? Maybe, in the end, the mind cares less about the source than we do. It responds not to the truth, but to the texture. So the synthetic past asks us not to reject what was never real, but to reconsider what we mean by real. If your most transformative moment came from a simulation, would you delete it, knowing it changed you? Or would you treasure it, even as its origin fades like morning fog? And if someday you revisit your life, only to find your most important memory suspended in the air, with no date, no photograph, no witness, will you still believe it matters? In that quiet uncertainty, we drift to the next paradox. Because when memory no longer anchors to fact, we begin to unhook from the river of time itself. And so, we turn the page into timelessness. The looping hour. It begins like a whisper at the edge of thought. A street you've never walked down, but somehow, you know the smell of its air. The cafe on the corner feels familiar. The bell above the door jingles and something inside you pauses, not because you've been here, but because it feels like you should have been. That eerie flicker. Déjà vu. Wait, someone murmurs next to you, staring at the same skyline. Have we done this before? You smile, not out of certainty, but recognition. And that's the loop. A strange and silent rhythm, spinning behind your awareness. Science has tried to name it. A neural hiccup, maybe. A misfire between short-term and long-term memory. But even the most rational explanations feel oddly hollow when you experience it. That ghost of familiarity. That tingling sense that the moment is wearing old clothes from a life that isn't quite yours. Some theories go deeper. They suggest it isn't memory misfiring at all, but memory overlapping. A version of you, somewhere adjacent, walking through the same hour. Perhaps your timelines brushed for just a second. Perhaps you didn't remember this from before, but from beside. The thought is soft but slippery. If memory can echo from lives you didn't live, then what does that say about identity? Is your memory yours, or just the strongest signal from the tangle of possibilities? There's a rhythm to these moments. Déjà vu never screams. It taps gently like rain on glass. You notice it after it's passed, and in that stillness, something opens. You feel that too? She asks, now seated beside you on a park bench, both of you watching an old man feed birds with crusts of bread. You nod. It's like I already knew he'd dropped the last piece. Maybe the mind doesn't just remember forward. Maybe it remembers across, or inward, or back around again. Because the more we understand about consciousness, the less it looks like a timeline, and more like a spiral staircase that you ascend while glimpsing versions of yourself on every other level. Some philosophers call it recursion. Some physicists call it temporal resonance. But you simply feel the hum of it. That life, this life, might not be the first draft. That this hour might not be the first time. And even if it's just a trick of neurons, that trick has a strange tenderness. It makes the world feel less isolated, more interwoven. Like you're not just in time, you're part of its rhythm. So next time it hits you, that odd lurch of familiarity, don't pull away. Let it wrap around you. Let it remind you that memory isn't always about storage. Sometimes it's about echo, and echoes don't follow straight lines. Now, what happens when the loop isn't just a moment, but everything? When the days return like seasons, when time forgets to move on? Let's gently drift into the idea of eternal return. And if sleep finds you before then, know this: the loops will be there when you wake. The eternal return. Have you ever felt it? That eerie pull, as if you've lived this moment before. Not just a fleeting déjà vu, but something heavier, more eternal. The sound of rain on the roof, the warmth of the mug in your hand, the thought you just had about someone you love, all of it. Familiar, suspiciously so. This is where the philosophy of the eternal return tiptoes in. Friedrich Nietzsche didn't mean it as a gentle theory. He meant it as a test. He imagined a world where every moment, every joy, every sorrow, every breath repeats over and over, infinitely, not like a record on repeat, but like a cosmic spiral, coiling back into itself. You are not just you right now. You have been you 1,000 times before and will be 1,000 times again. And your memories? They are simply bookmarks in the great looping book of your existence. Would you live this exact life again, exactly the same way? He asked. In the still of night, this question becomes thunder. Because if time is not a line but a circle, then nothing is ever truly lost. The heartbreak you thought you buried, it may already be on its way back. The love you felt that seemed too brief, perhaps it's circling toward you again, just out of view. Hey, do you ever feel like you've had this exact conversation before? Like this moment, right now? Yeah, even what you just said. It's weirdly familiar. Maybe we're stuck in a loop. Or maybe we're meant to be. In this theory, memory stops being a timeline and becomes a compass, not pointing north, but back to yourself. Your regrets, your victories, the things you didn't say, they aren't just parts of the past, they're future invitations. So how does it feel, truly, to carry the weight of an infinite story? Some say it's paralyzing, that the thought of never escaping yourself is unbearable. Others say it's freeing, because if you must live this life forever, you might as well live it beautifully. Laugh harder, forgive faster, breathe deeper. What you do now echoes not just forward, but around. Even your smallest choices ripple across time, tracing themselves again and again like footsteps in fresh snow that never melts. And yet, memory becomes more than a personal archive. It becomes sacred, a mirror that does not forget, even when you do. If everything returns, what is worth remembering? What do you choose to hold tightly, knowing you'll hold it again? What becomes holy in the loop? As the thought settles into your mind like fog on a still lake, you might start to feel the silence stretch. Not frightening, just wide, as if time is exhaling around you. And then, softly, another question drifts in. If we are indeed trapped in repetition, then why does memory decay? Shouldn't we remember everything, always? The next theory explores that quiet contradiction, the slow fade, the vanishing trail of memory, the long, aching silence between returns. The slow fade. It always surprises us. That gentle, aching realization when something once vivid turns vague, like the face of a friend you swore you'd never forget. The sound of their laugh, once echoing through your chest, now muffled behind the walls of time. Why do we forget the moments we swore we never would? Neuroscience offers no melodrama, just soft explanations. Memory isn't a vault, it's a garden. Not something stored, but something grown. Each time we recall a moment, we trace over the neural lines that hold it. But the brain, being practical, prunes what we neglect. If you stop walking the path, The weeds reclaim it. If you stop speaking the name, even the air forgets how it once shaped your lips. Late at night, over a quiet mug of tea, two people sit across a worn kitchen table. One asks, "Do you remember the trip we took years ago? The small beach, the red umbrellas?" The other stares out the window, blinking slowly. Only the smell of the sunscreen. Everything else, kind of melted. They don't fight it. They just sit there. A pause held in shared fading. Memories don't disappear like a firework. They dissolve like mist. Gradually, silently, not stolen, just uninvited. That moment you once vowed to never lose, your first concert, the last words of someone gone, the sky on a life-changing afternoon, doesn't vanish with force. It simply stops being rebuilt. The neural scaffolding weakens and the colors blur. There's no betrayal in it, no cruelty, just the soft arithmetic of time and attention. We keep what we rehearse. We lose what we let rest too long in the attic. And it raises a quiet question in the heart. What parts of me have I lost not because they hurt, but because I stopped saying hello to them? Not every absence is grief. Some are simply distance. Neglect doesn't break a memory. It just lets the dust settle. A woman once stood in a hallway, trying to recall the color of her childhood bedroom. She could picture the window, the curtain fluttering in spring air, but the walls, blank. And in that blankness, there was no sadness, just a calm acknowledgement. I didn't bring that memory with me, and life moved on. This is the slow fade, a gentle slipping away, not from damage, but from disuse, like pages in a journal left blank or a piano untuned. Nothing wrong exactly, just quiet. But here's the thing, some memories don't fade. Not really. They duck beneath the surface, waiting. And the next segment? We go looking for them. Into the fog of what's been buried. Into the glitch that doesn't forget, but hides. The forgotten prison. What if the darkest chapter of your life was one you never remembered living? There's a certain silence that surrounds trauma, not because it isn't real, but because the mind, in its strange kindness, sometimes chooses to bury it. Repressed memory theory proposes that some events, too intense or overwhelming, are not erased, but sealed away like a storm behind glass. We walk through life unaware until a crack appears, a scent, a laugh, a street corner, and suddenly we're flooded, not with memory itself, but with the shadow it left behind. "You ever get that feeling?" she asked as they sat on a park bench, watching kids play in the distance. "Like something's wrong with you, but you can't explain why?" He nodded slowly, not looking at her. "Sometimes I dream about drowning, but I've never even been near deep water." There's a haunting in that kind of unknowing, when the body remembers what the mind refuses to. Nightmares that make no sense. A panic that surfaces without warning. A face in a crowd that chills your spine for reasons you can't articulate. You're not imagining it. The prison isn't empty. It's simply dark. Psychologists have long debated the nature of repressed memories. Some believe they are artifacts of the mind's survival instinct, a protective mechanism to keep us functioning. Others caution against their reliability, arguing that memory is malleable, and recovered fragments may blur truth and fiction. But whether scientifically proven or not, the emotional residue is real. People feel it, and sometimes that's more powerful than proof. "I never knew why I hated that song," he whispered, staring out the train window. "Until one day it played in a store, and I had a panic attack. I still don't know what happened, but my hands were shaking, When memory becomes a prison, it doesn't always come with bars or keys. It's a fog, a weight, a quiet ache in your gut. You may never recall the event, but its impact shapes you. Your choices, your fears, even the people you're drawn to or repelled by. In that sense, the forgotten still speaks. And here's the quiet tragedy. Some of the most broken parts of us come from moments we can't even name. So healing becomes a puzzle with missing pieces. You don't know what you're looking for, only that something is missing. Therapy, journaling, meditation. These are ways people try to gently knock on those locked doors, hoping that memory, when ready, will open. But not all forgotten prisons need to be reopened. Sometimes the walls were built for your protection. The mind, after all, is both architect and guardian. "What if I never remember?" she asked, voice almost childlike. "Then maybe you were never meant to," he replied. "But that doesn't mean you can't still be free." As the stars blink above us and the world grows still, we're left with a strange peace. Perhaps forgetting is not failure, but mercy. A quiet decision by the subconscious to preserve the soul. But then again, what if the memory wasn't buried at all? What if it was taken? Let's walk forward into the next corridor of the mind, where memory theft isn't just a metaphor, it's a possibility. The stolen past. There's a silence in the room that feels too quiet, like a museum before opening hours. You blink and wonder, why does something feel missing? But you can't name what. Not like forgetting a wallet or a phone, more like misplacing a part of yourself. Have you ever had a moment where someone insisted a memory didn't happen, and they said it so calmly, so repeatedly, that you began to doubt yourself? That's not just miscommunication, it's erosion. A quiet stealing of the past, one detail at a time. Neurology speaks of extreme possibilities, brain damage, or perhaps the wild whispers of science fiction, where memories are extracted and swapped like files on a drive. But you don't need a machine to steal a memory. Sometimes it only takes a smile, a tone, or a story repeated often enough to take root in your mind. "Didn't you always love that song?" Someone asks gently, pressing play on a playlist you don't remember creating. You nod, uncertain. "I guess I did." They look pleased. "See? You've always been like that." Gaslighting isn't just a tactic, it's a quiet remodel of the foundation, and it doesn't have to come from malice. It can come from media, repetition, good intentions even. Commercials that tell you what childhood should have felt like. Families that narrate your youth until you adopt their version. Partners who insist you were happy when you weren't. Over time, your own recollection can become soft clay, shaped into something else entirely. You walk past a familiar cafe and pause. You remember sitting there, laughing. But then, was that really your laughter? Or was it borrowed from a photo, a retelling, someone else's comfort? "Hey," someone calls behind you. "Didn't we go there once after the storm?" You nod, again, because it's easier, because you're tired, because maybe they're right. And this is where it gets strange. Not only can someone rewrite your story, but you might thank them for it. Gratitude becomes a survival instinct. "They helped me remember who I was," you tell yourself. But were they helping you remember or replace? That's the cruelty of it. Because rewritten memories don't leave obvious scars. They just slip into your inner monologue, change your beliefs, shift your boundaries. And in the end, you find yourself defending a version of yourself you never meant to become. You close your eyes tonight wondering, if the story of you was told by someone else, can you ever be sure what's truly yours? And then a softer voice, half asleep beside you, whispers, did you ever really choose? A pause? A breath? Or were you guided gently by memories that weren't yours to begin with? As the night deepens, that question lingers, not to haunt, but to soften the edge of certainty. Because up next comes the illusion of control. If our memories shape our decisions, was choice ever truly ours to make? Let it drift. Let it carry you. Let the question remain open, like a door you can walk through whenever you're ready. The illusion of choice. Have you ever stopped mid-decision and wondered, did I really choose this, or was I just reacting? In a world that values free will, this question feels like an unwanted whisper in the back of the mind. But what if that whisper is more real than the voice that shouts, I chose this? Modern neuroscience paints a strange picture. Experiments have shown that the brain often makes decisions up to 7 seconds before we consciously realize it. When reaching for a cup of coffee, feeling like it was a spontaneous urge, but your brain had already paved that path, cued by familiarity, emotion, and past routines. Your hand didn't decide, your memory did. Hey, do you ever feel like you're not the one steering the wheel? I do, like I'm reacting more than choosing. But then again, maybe awareness itself is a kind of control. Exactly. Maybe choice isn't about changing the road, but realizing you're already on it. Memory isn't just storage, it's a sculptor. It shapes the contours of who we think we are. It filters options before they even reach our awareness, quietly nudging us toward the familiar, the emotionally safe, or the previously rewarding. You think you're choosing the blue shirt over the red one, but maybe your memory just whispered, last time you wore red, you got ignored. So you reach for blue, not by logic, but by trace. If your memories shape your preferences before they even surface in your mind, then what is free will? Is it merely the illusion painted on top of deep neurological automation? Perhaps the truth is more delicate than that. Maybe freedom isn't in what you do, but in noticing why you do it. The awareness of your impulses may be the first act of true independence. So, is awareness enough? Can watching your patterns break the loop? Would you say you ever made a truly new decision? I'm not sure. Every time I think it's new, it still feels like I've been here before. Like I'm rearranging furniture in a room built years ago. Yeah. But sometimes noticing the room is the first step to walking out. You may not always choose what you want, but you can choose how you see your wanting. That small shift in awareness, the pause, the breath, the question, might be the quietest form of freedom. It may not scream, but it frees you from being sleepwalked by your past. And if your individual mind can be so shaped by its memory, what happens when that mind belongs to a collective, a society, a civilization? In the next theory, we'll explore what it means to carry not just your own memories, but those of an entire culture. The weight of history. Somewhere between the rustle of old flags and the scent of incense rising at a forgotten altar, a question lingers. Can a society remember the way a person does? Not through neurons and synapses, but through stories passed in quiet kitchens, through holidays that arrive each year like clockwork, and through names etched into marble as if permanence could be carved into stone. A father walks his son past a war memorial. The boy asks, "Did we win?" The father doesn't answer right away. His eyes trace the names. "It depends who you ask," he finally says. And just like that, a legacy shifts. Slightly. This is collective memory. Not a photo in a frame, but a cathedral of shared impressions, built brick by songs, wounds, myths, and school books. A past rehearsed, then retold until it feels more lived than living. But the strange part? You may never realize you've inherited a memory. You simply are what it made you. The flags you salute, the history you defend, the villains you hate or forgive, the justice you demand. They may not have begun with you, but they move through you, like the river doesn't question the source of its current. Sometimes you walk through a city and feel proud without knowing why. Sometimes you distrust a stranger, even though they've done nothing wrong. Sometimes you cry at an anthem you don't even understand. I wonder why I always choke up at this song, she says, folding napkins at the diner. Maybe your grandfather marched to it, her coworker offers, pouring coffee without looking up. Memory doesn't always speak in full sentences. Sometimes it hums beneath the surface, whispers, "Don't forget." Other times it shouts, and those echoes become identity. And just as personal trauma shapes the individual, so too does collective trauma shape nations. A burning city, a lost homeland, a revolution that rewrote the calendar. It's not just about what happened, it's about how we agreed to remember it, or how we were told to. Because history isn't always the past. Sometimes it's a mirror, sometimes a leash, sometimes a wound disguised as pride. And then there's the forgetting, the parts erased, hidden or never spoken of again. A statue removed, a chapter omitted, a tradition quietly dropped. The absence grows roots too, as if silence itself were a form of memory, one that tightens the more we pretend it isn't there. She leans over the fence, watching the children play in costume. Who are they dressed as? She asks the teacher. Heroes from the liberation, comes the reply. She pauses. I thought that war was different. The teacher shrugs. It depends on the textbook. We carry the memories of people we've never met. We defend stories we've never read. And sometimes we carry shame for events we didn't cause. Because to be human in a tribe is to feel the weight of the tribe's shadow. But here's the tender truth. You are not required to carry all of it. You can look at the story you were handed and ask, which parts do I honor? Which parts do I release? Which parts were never truly mine? And then you sleep, not to forget, but to make space. Because even memory, collective or personal, needs room to breathe. Let's rest here for a moment. Let the sound of the past quiet in your chest. And when you're ready, we'll step into a deeper silence. The silence that follows erasure. The Great Forgetting. Somewhere between bedtime and history class, a question lingers like the last breath before sleep. What happens when memory is not lost, but taken? A soft voice enters. Didn't there used to be a library here? I think so. Or maybe it was a statue, or a story, something. The silence that follows feels heavier than an answer. Throughout the ages, the most dangerous weapon wasn't always a sword or a gun. It was the eraser. Cultural amnesia, as historians call it, is the quiet genocide of meaning. When a regime burns books, bans a native tongue, silences songs once sung at the edge of campfires, it's not just facts being deleted. It's the emotional architecture of a people being disassembled, page by page, word by word, until there's no memory left to grieve. But it never feels like a sudden collapse. No alarm sounds when a tradition vanishes. No obituary is written when a story is unlearned. It begins as a gentle fading, disguised as progress. A ritual skipped, a name forgotten, a map redrawn. The next generation asks fewer questions, and soon, no one remembers the answers were stolen. This is not just history, it's strategy. Because to control what a society remembers is to steer what it believes. If memory is power, forgetting becomes a form of quiet domination. A people who no longer remember who they were are easier to manipulate into becoming something else. They grow roots in the present, but those roots float, untethered from truth. What were your grandparents like? They never really talked about it, just said things used to be different. And now? I'm not sure if I want to know, or if I could understand it if I did. When forgetting is generational, the pain becomes invisible. There are no scars for what you don't even know you lost. And in that silence, narratives are replaced. A lie, repeated often enough, becomes a country's foundation. A myth, endorsed by power, becomes sacred. This erasure isn't always imposed. Sometimes it's internalized. Sometimes people forget on purpose, to cope, to survive. A culture might bury its past because it's too painful to remember, but even buried seeds grow something. And what grows from silence may not resemble truth at all. So tonight, as your thoughts soften and your breath evens out, ask yourself, what stories shaped the world you live in, and who decided which ones you never heard? Is it more unsettling to forget, or to never know you were supposed to remember? Let that thought echo like a fading footstep through the chambers of your mind, because just beyond this hallway of erased histories waits a door, not to the past, but to the future. And it asks an impossible question. What happens to your identity if your future memories start to vanish before they're even made? The answer lies ahead. Let's walk deeper into the mind. The self that time forgot. You open your eyes, but the name they call you feels like it belongs to someone else. There's warmth in the voice, yes, but no echo inside. A woman places her hand gently on your shoulder. She seems kind. You nod. Smile, maybe. But deep down, something feels like a hallway where all the pictures have been taken down. That's the quiet terror of forgetting who you are. Alzheimer's is not just the thief of memory. It is the erosion of self. It does not crash like a wave, but dissolves like mist, so gently that at first you think you've misplaced a moment, not your identity. First, it's the car keys, then the way home, then the meaning of the word home itself. Loved ones become strangers, strangers become noise, and soon, you yourself are just presence. No past to explain you, no context to hold you. Grandpa, do you remember me? A boy's voice, curious, not accusing. You squint. The shape of his face stirs a kind of warmth, but it has no name, no anchor. I remember the sun, you say. I remember laughter. And though he doesn't fully understand, the boy smiles back, because some part of you is still reaching out. Psychologists once believed memory was like a filing cabinet. Open a drawer, retrieve a fact. But we now know it's more like a living script. Your mind doesn't just recall memories, it reconstructs them. In that reconstruction lies identity. And when those memories go missing, so does the mirror in which we recognize ourselves. So what's left when even the mirror cracks? Some say the soul remains, that there's something unnameable underneath the facts, a kind of emotional fingerprint. A person might forget their child's name but still light up at the sound of that child's laughter. Love lingers longer than logic, but even that, over time, can dim. And when it does, what remains? A body? A breath? A shadow that once cast a life? Two nurses pass in the hallway. One leans in and whispers, "He used to dance every morning at sunrise. Even now, he taps his fingers to music no one else hears." The other smiles, watching from afar. Maybe that rhythm is who he is. Maybe memory is just how the soul hums to itself. It's tempting to believe identity is some permanent fixture, untouched by age, but the truth might be gentler and harder. Maybe we are simply stories told to ourselves in the language of memory, a collage of childhoods, habits, places, voices. If so, when those stories fade, the self becomes a breeze slipping through a broken screen, still moving, but impossible to frame. Still, don't mistake absence for emptiness. Sometimes presence without memory is its own kind of truth. The gaze, the gesture, the inexplicable comfort when someone holds your hand even if you don't know their name. There's something pure about that. Wordless. Deep. So who are you when the stories vanish? Are you the sum of what you recall, or the feeling you leave behind in others? And if the self is made of memories, stitched and woven, can we restitch it somehow? Can we rebuild a soul with science? Memory implants, artificial recollection, stories grafted into the brain. That is where we're headed next. Close your eyes gently and drift forward. The mind is waiting. The memory you chose. What if your life could be edited like a film, frame by frame, memory by memory? Imagine sitting in a quiet room, heart calm, as a soft light pulses behind your closed eyes. A voice whispers, "Which memory would you like to keep today?" And you begin scrolling through your past the way you might flick through photos, not just to remember, but to decide. Wouldn't that be dangerous? A man's voice asks gently. His partner smiles, stirring her tea. Or freeing, she replies. I mean, what if I could forget the pain, but keep the lesson? This isn't far-off science fiction anymore. In the glowing laboratories of modern neuroscience, the walls hum with possibility. Optogenetics, once a fringe marvel, is now planting false memories into mice with eerie precision. In one experiment, a mouse freezes in terror at a location it never experienced harm in. Why? Because the memory of danger was installed, like software. And we are not so far from being next. Now picture this. A day comes when you can enhance every joyful moment, amplify the laughter of your childhood, add sun to your darkest days, or even splice in memories that never truly happened. A confident version of you, climbing trees with ease. A supportive parent who always believed in your potential. A moment that never existed, except it feels like it did. But with every addition, something unspoken trembles beneath the surface. What are we erasing in return? If you delete the heartbreak that taught you boundaries, do you lose the strength that came after? If you craft a childhood filled with praise, do you forget the hunger that drove your growth? A gentle silence follows. Do you think I'd still be me? The man asks softly. The woman considers. Maybe you'd be the version you always wished to be. Or maybe just someone you no longer recognize. This is where the paradox deepens. Self-improvement is often our goal, to heal, grow, become better. But when you can sculpt the past at will, where does growth stop and fiction begin? If your identity is formed by your memories, and those memories can be chosen, are you building a self or curating a performance? We all rewrite our past in subtle ways, forgetting pain, romanticizing youth, telling stories that change with time. But what happens when it's no longer metaphorical? When you can walk into a clinic and request the deletion of grief or the addition of confidence? Will people chase idealized versions of themselves until the real one fades? Memory, after all, is not a record. It's a canvas. And if we hold the brush too tightly, we may forget what the original colors look like. He leans back, watching a bird outside. I think I'd rather keep the scar, he says. It reminds me I survived. She nods, her gaze distant. Maybe we're not meant to feel good all the time. Maybe we're just meant to remember truthfully, whatever that means. The room quiets. Just breath, the ticking of time, and the soft hum of possibility. And yet, in this stillness, a deeper question whispers, what if memory isn't just something we add, but something we fracture? The next idea cracks the self apart, and with it, the mirror of identity may never reflect quite the same again. The divided self. The softest conflicts are the ones you never notice, like quiet static behind a favorite song. That's how it begins. Two versions of the same moment, both insisting they are true. A smile you gave because you meant it, or because you didn't want to cause a scene. A goodbye that felt like freedom and also regret. Both stories breathe inside you, and both refuse to leave. In the world of psychology, this is not a flaw, it's a feature. Cognitive dissonance, confabulation. Names given to the elegant messiness of the mind, which rewrites gaps with bridges that never existed. You don't lie to yourself on purpose. You simply smooth over the cracks so you can keep walking. And sometimes, you don't even know a crack was there. Wait, one voice says softly. Didn't we leave because we were brave? A quieter voice murmurs. I think we were scared. You pause at the sink, hands under warm water, staring at the reflection, and you're not quite sure which voice belongs to you, or if both do. Trauma sharpens the edges. Under pressure, memory doesn't always fracture cleanly. It compartments, like a desk drawer slammed shut with its contents still rattling. The self divides into roles. The one who endured, the one who fled, the one who stayed quiet. And each holds a separate version of events, stitched with private meanings and muted truths. You might find yourself defending something you no longer believe, laughing at a joke you didn't enjoy, or waking up from a dream so vivid it leaves behind the scent of a place you've never been. It's not madness. It's survival. The mind, in all its strange grace, knows how to carry too much by carrying it in parts. A woman once whispered as she folded laundry, "Some days, I feel like I'm two people who've agreed not to speak unless necessary." The man beside her replied, "And when they do speak?" She smiled. "They argue about what happened." That's the haunting beauty of memory. It is not one voice. It is a choir, slightly out of tune. But perhaps that is not a flaw to be fixed. Perhaps harmony doesn't mean singing the same note. Perhaps peace is letting each part of you tell its truth without needing them to match. So the question isn't, which version is real? It's, can I make room for both? And as the night deepens and your breath slows, let that be enough. Two truths, one heart, still beating. But when contradictions begin to pull at the seams of identity, when the voices grow too loud to ignore, what happens to the self that once felt whole? The next memory glitch leads us into a deeper disconnection, the quiet unraveling of dissociation. The ghost in the room. Have you ever sat in a crowded place and felt absent? As if the version of you smiling, nodding, speaking was more like an echo than a real voice? There's a strange hush that enters the soul in moments like that. Not fear, not calm, but something in between. A watching presence, a ghost in the room, and the room is your own life. Dissociation isn't always loud. It doesn't scream or announce itself. It often slips in during moments of overwhelm, quietly, like fog wrapping around a window. 1 second you're there, and the next, you're hovering, observing, as though your memories are being captured by someone else, someone colder, someone who didn't flinch when you couldn't breathe. That's what dissociative memory is, a gentle fracture in awareness designed to protect the self. In the midst of trauma, the mind sometimes decides it's safer not to be there at all. A young girl walks through a hospital hallway after hearing news no child should ever hear. She doesn't cry. Her eyes are dry. She remembers the tiles on the floor, the smell of disinfectant, the hum of the fluorescent lights. But she doesn't remember herself. Her own body feels like a stranger's coat she slipped into. Years later, she wonders why that day feels like watching someone else's movie. The camera kept rolling. The actress kept acting. But the soul had quietly stepped outside for air. In psychology, this is called depersonalization or derealization, part of the broader family of dissociative responses. And at the center of it is memory. Memories made without full presence. Memories recorded without the self. It's like being haunted by your own biography. Have you ever felt like that? Someone might whisper to a friend. Like what? Like you were in the room, but not in it, watching everything as if it wasn't happening to you. The friend nods slowly. I thought I was the only one. We're taught that memory is ownership, that to remember is to possess. But what if some memories don't belong to us in the traditional sense? What if they belong to the version of us that had to split off and survive? The quiet self, the distant self, the observer, the ghost. And yet, here's the paradox. Those memories still shape us. They still influence our fears, our choices, our identities, even when we weren't quite there, even when we had to leave our own mind to endure. So are they less real? Or more? A man once said he couldn't remember his father's funeral. He was there. He spoke. But it's all blank now. I think, he confessed, I watched it happen from the back of the room, or maybe from inside my own chest, like a bird watching through a rib cage. His voice trembled not with pain, but with mystery. And perhaps that's the most unsettling part. Dissociative memory doesn't just obscure the past. It reframes what it means to be you. If you weren't fully present during the moment, is it still part of your story? Or does it belong to the shadow you left behind? There's comfort in thinking memory is a reliable archive, a clean recording of what happened, to whom, and how. But in dissociation, the recorder keeps running even when the subject goes missing. You become both director and ghost, actor and absentee. And sometimes, you never quite come back. As you lie down tonight and close your eyes, perhaps there's a part of you that remembers, dimly, a room you left behind, a moment you weren't ready for, a scene recorded without your soul inside. And maybe, just maybe, that's okay. Because survival too is a kind of wisdom, a quiet wisdom that chose presence later when it was safe. But what happens when dissociation becomes not just a defense, but a lifestyle? When retreat becomes habit and imagination starts filling in the blanks? The next theory peers into something even more unsettling than absence, the creation of memories that never happened. We now enter the realm of false memory. The memory that lied to you. You were sure you locked the door. You even remember the satisfying click, that little surge of control. But hours later, the door is ajar, untouched, as if your certainty had been borrowed from someone else's day. It's unsettling, because the memory felt real, solid, lived. That's the cruel trick of false memories. They don't wear a label. They walk in wearing the right shoes, speaking with your voice, touching emotions as if they've earned their place. There is no blinking light or warning tone, just you, remembering something that never happened, with the same intensity you reserve for your most sacred truths. Wait, are you telling me I could misremember my own childhood?" The woman at the cafe leaned forward, half laughing, half fearing the answer. Her friend replied softly, "Not just misremember. You might believe the false one more, simply because it feels sharper. Then, how would I ever know?" There was a pause. Then came the only honest answer. "You might not. The brain, after all, doesn't store life like a video file. It paints, it sculpts, it edits. Every time we recall a moment, we open the file, tweak it, ever so slightly, and resave. Over time, some truths gain polish they never earned. Others fade at the edges until they vanish altogether. You don't play back the past. You reconstruct it. And every reconstruction is an invitation for error. It's easy to see how this works in small things. The color of the hallway, the time of a phone call, a childhood trip that might have been two different vacations stitched into one. But it's the emotional memories, the ones that shaped your sense of self, that feel most threatening when they turn out to be wrong. A man once told me he carried guilt for years over shouting at his sister during their last conversation. The pain had shaped how he treated every apology since. But when he finally found her, years later, she told him it never happened. He had confused his anger at himself for a memory. He had built a penance around a ghost. So what happens when trust isn't just something you give to others, but something you have to give yourself? If your brain can mislead you, gently, without malice, then how do you move forward? Is doubt a symptom of growth, or a fracture in your reality? These aren't questions with clean edges. They're foggy, like breath on glass. But maybe that's the point. The mind, beautiful and unpredictable, gives us more stories than facts. And sometimes, it hides its own edits so well, even we forget there was ever a red pen. Late at night, when the mind quiets down and memory rises like steam in a dim room, these questions linger, not as threats, but as quiet invitations to notice more gently, to loosen the grip, to treat memory not as a courtroom, but as a dreamscape, soft and shifting, painted with feeling more than fact. And if memory can lie to you without meaning to, what happens when those lies begin to replace your world entirely? Let's walk together into the next glitch, where simulation begins and reality forgets to knock. The simulated remembering. Have you ever sat alone, thinking about your past, and suddenly felt like none of it quite belonged to you? As if the memories, those cherished, painful, quiet little moments, weren't something you lived, but something you were given, installed, like software. That eerie feeling is where simulation theory meets memory. If we are truly living inside a simulated reality, a digital construct built by an intelligence far greater than ours, then what becomes of memory? What if each kiss, each heartbreak, every summer night or childhood dream was never a spontaneous echo of experience, but a scripted sequence in your personal storyline? Do you ever think we're being loaded? Loaded? Yeah. Like I remember my 6th birthday, right? The cake, the song, the blue balloon. But I can't feel it anymore. It's like I just recall remembering it. Maybe that's all memory is, just a loop running on autopilot. Simulation theorists suggest that what we think of as the past may be little more than a save state in a cosmic server, a pre-made bundle of emotional code designed not for accuracy, but for continuity. Your joy might be an illusion created to maintain consistency. Your regrets, pre-written tension in a narrative arc too vast for you to understand. It's unsettling, deeply so. If someone or something can upload your memories, what then defines your identity? If the laughs and tears were pre-programmed, Is there such a thing as authenticity anymore? Can we still say we've lived? The philosophers warn us, if perception is all we have, then the difference between lived truth and constructed fiction is psychological dust, real only because we feel it. But what if even that feeling is not yours? What if it was designed to keep you from questioning? And yet, you do feel. When you remember the warmth of a mother's hug or the sting of your first betrayal, it floods your chest, doesn't it? It hurts. It heals. It moves you. So even if it's fake, does that make it less real? I don't know. Maybe real is just what makes your heart react. Then maybe the simulation is the truth. Maybe memory, then, is not a vault of truth, but a theater of sensation. You sit in the audience, watching scenes play out on the stage of your mind, applauding or crying or trembling. But the script, that may have been handed to you long ago. Still, there's a quiet magic in the performance, in every improvised reaction, every unique pause, every accidental smile. So if this is a simulation, perhaps the code is not the enemy. Perhaps it is the medium, and your memory, the art. But let's pause that thought for a moment. Because sometimes the memory that unsettles us isn't about what we remember, but the nagging feeling that someone else remembers us too, that we're not alone in our recall, that something watches our inner world, frame by frame. In the next segment, we explore the memory of being watched. The witness within. There's a quiet space in your mind. You know the one. Not where the thoughts form, but just a bit above them, where something watches, not judging, not speaking, just aware. Like someone sitting in the corner of the room, never interrupting the conversation, but never leaving either. This isn't paranoia. It's not fear of being seen. It's the sensation that you're already being seen by yourself. That presence, we often call it self-awareness. But in the deeper folds of memory science, it's something stranger. A cognitive echo. A meta-self. It's not just you being present. It's you witnessing yourself being present, watching your laughter, noticing your sadness, remembering the way your hand trembled when you reached for the door, but also remembering the part of you that noticed the trembling. Do you ever feel like you're playing a role even when no one's around? She asked him one night as they walked home from a movie neither of them remembered afterward. He smiled, hands deep in his coat pockets. Sometimes I feel like there's a version of me taking notes, not in judgment, just recording. Her reply was quiet. And you wonder who it's for. This inner witness doesn't speak in words. It doesn't criticize. It merely stores. Not events, but meaning. Not sights, but the awareness of seeing. That's why some memories aren't about what happened, but how you felt while it was happening. Like that strange, detached calm during a breakup, or the distant warmth as you watched someone you loved walk away. Perhaps memory isn't a scrapbook of past events. Perhaps it's a system of surveillance. Your mind keeping a log, a journal that no one else will ever read. And maybe that's why the loneliest moments linger the longest, because the only one watching was you. There's something intimate, even sacred, about being your own witness. But there's also a quiet tragedy in it. When no one else sees, when no one else remembers, we lean harder into our internal camera. We store the glances that were never returned, the words we almost said, the songs we sang to no one. I don't know why I remember that afternoon, he whispered once, curled beneath a window's faded light. Nothing happened. She didn't turn to look at him, just whispered back, maybe something inside you noticed that nothing happened, and that was enough. The mind doesn't just hold memories, it composes them, edits them, frames them with a soft light, like a filmmaker trying to make sense of raw footage. But if there's a filmmaker, there's also an audience. Someone sitting in the back row, never clapping, never leaving, just watching the film of your life, endlessly on loop. And this is where it gets unsettling. What if the reason we remember is because that internal witness refuses to look away? That no matter how much we try to move on, forget, or rewrite, the watcher within continues to press record, even in silence, even in sleep. You're not broken for feeling observed when you're alone. You're not strange for catching your own gaze in the mirror and feeling as if someone else is there. That presence, it might just be the soft, eternal eye of memory itself. Let's rest here, just for a while. The stillness is enough. The next thought will take us even deeper, into memories we never lived, but still somehow ache for. And if you drift off now, that's perfectly okay. The witness will remember it for you. The longing for a life unlived. Have you ever looked at a photograph of a place you've never visited and felt homesick? Or caught yourself mourning a version of you that never got the chance to exist? It begins softly, an ache beneath your ribs, a sigh during silence, the sensation that something important was missed, even though you don't know what it was. That's the longing for a life unlived. And it doesn't ask for logic. It asks for recognition. Sometimes it begins in childhood. A story told by a grandparent, a black and white film that lodged itself in your dreams, or a book that felt more like a memory than a narrative. You might not realize it at the time, but something in you attached itself to that alternate path, to that person you never became, to that home that never held you. Do you ever get this strange feeling, she whispers, like you belonged somewhere else? He pauses, adjusting the blanket. All the time, but I don't think it's about the place. I think it's about the life I didn't get to live. Neuroscience tells us memory is more than retrieval. It's reconstruction. Every time we recall something, we reshape it. Colors deepen, shadows soften, emotions change tone. But what happens when we apply this reconstructive process to stories we were never part of? When a dream, a film, a myth starts behaving like memory. This is where nostalgia becomes uncanny. It wraps itself around the unreal. Your brain, unaware of strict borders between fantasy and fact, begins attaching emotional weight to the imagined. And the strangest thing, your body responds. Tears fall, smiles form, grief stirs for something that never even happened. Perhaps we were always meant to carry unlived lives within us, parallel paths we brushed past in sleep or in silence, versions of ourselves we never got to choose, yet still feel tethered to. And maybe memory doesn't mind, because memory isn't just a ledger of facts, it's a map of meanings. There's a quiet sorrow in this, an echo of lost potential, but also a strange beauty. Because this longing, this mourning for the might have been, tells us we are more than our histories. We are the sum of our wishes, our empathy, our imagined selves. You cry over the tragedy in a novel, not because you lived it, but because part of you could have. I used to dream I was a lighthouse keeper, he murmurs. Alone, surrounded by sea. I don't know why it makes me sad. Maybe it's not sadness, she says. Maybe it's just memory trying to remember something your body never lived, but your soul did. In this quiet yearning, a new kind of memory is born, not of reality, but of resonance. It doesn't matter whether the memory is false or true. What matters is the shape it leaves in us. the emotional fingerprint it presses onto the heart. So next time you feel a pull toward a place unknown, or grieve for a person you never were, don't dismiss it as irrational. Consider it a kind of soul memory, not remembered from the past, but from the unlived. And yet, if our hearts can recall what never was, what happens to what was, but is no longer remembered at all? The next passage leads us into the overgrown ruins of collective forgetting, where even truth fades like mist at morning. The city that forgot itself. It starts quietly, not with explosions or sirens, but with the subtle silence that follows change. A corner store that never reopens, a mural repainted into gray, the smell of grilled corn replaced by artisanal coffee. No announcements are made, no eulogies are written, and yet something is lost. Urban decay wears no uniform. Sometimes it's rust and broken glass. Other times, it's polish and progress. The streets may still carry names, but not the same footsteps. What once echoed with children's games now hums with real estate jargon. And slowly, the neighborhood stops recognizing itself. "This place feels different," someone says while walking past a boarded-up community center. "It's the same street," the other replies. "But something's off, like it's wearing someone else's clothes." This is spatial amnesia, a forgetting that doesn't happen in the mind, but in the soil, the walls, the air. Where memory once clung to the sound of Sunday music spilling from balconies, now there is curated silence, a vacuum dressed up as vibrancy, the skeleton of a culture painted over, brick by brick. They say memory lives in the heart, but perhaps it also lives in cracked sidewalks, in the way certain buildings cast shadows at 5 p.m., in the smell of a bakery that hasn't been open in 10 years, but lingers anyway. When those markers disappear, memory becomes homeless. You see, people don't always realize when they're being displaced, not just from their homes, but from their histories. When the language on the shop signs changes, when the corner bench disappears, when the faces become unfamiliar. It's not just a new city, it's a new story, one they're no longer written into. And what happens to those who stay behind, to those who wake up and feel like guests in the place they once called home? A man once stood in front of a wall where his favorite cafe used to be. He didn't look angry or nostalgic, just confused. "I used to come here every Sunday with my daughter," he said softly, as if saying it out loud might bring it back. But the wall didn't answer. It never does. This city didn't collapse. It just shed its memory. Not all at once, but like skin, peeling in layers. Some parts are still intact, but they don't connect anymore. Like fragments of a dream you almost remember when you wake up, and then don't. There's a peculiar grief to this kind of forgetting. Not dramatic, not loud, but ambient. It seeps in. People begin to doubt their own recollections. "Wasn't there a jazz bar here?" "No, I think you're thinking of somewhere else." And just like that, another thread snaps. Yet some remember, not in protest, but in presence, in cooking the same recipe every Friday, in humming an old melody while waiting for the bus, in tracing the outline of a demolished house with their eyes. But even they know the memory is fragile, held together by habit, not infrastructure. So what do we do when the world forgets for us? When memory isn't something we carry, but something that used to carry us? Perhaps that's when forgetting stops being an accident and becomes a choice, a quiet survival, a step forward without looking back. And with that gentle ache in our chest, we drift to the next thought. Not every memory is erased. Some are surrendered. In the next segment, we explore those who choose to forget, not because they must, but because they can. The mercy of forgetting. There's a strange tenderness in forgetting, an act not always born of neglect, but of quiet mercy. Late at night, when the mind flickers between thought and dream, something within us chooses what to hold and what to release. Motivated forgetting, as psychologists call it, is not about denial. It's not about burying truth beneath layers of lies. No, it's about relinquishment, a gentle letting go. The mind, in its wisdom, knows that not every memory deserves the weight of forever. Imagine two friends walking under amber streetlights. One turns and says, "Do you ever wonder why you can't remember certain things from your childhood?" The other laughs softly. "Maybe my brain decided I didn't need them, like old clothes that no longer fit. But what if they were important? If they were, maybe I would have remembered. Or maybe forgetting was the kindest thing my mind ever did for me." There's something beautiful in that surrender, in not forcing the past to wear a crown it doesn't deserve. The idea that forgetting is failure is a harsh myth. Sometimes it's the only way forward, because the truth is, our minds are not infinite libraries. They are more like gardens, pruning what chokes the roots so something better can bloom. Motivated forgetting isn't the same as repression. Repression hides memories behind closed doors, hoping they'll never break free. But this is more like putting down a heavy stone because you've finally accepted you don't need to carry it. It's trust in your own emotional architecture, that you can still be whole, even if you've misplaced a few pages of your story. And it's in those silences, in those invisible erasures, that grace finds a home. You don't remember every tear you cried, every time your heart cracked. You don't recall each sharp word flung during an argument. And maybe that's not weakness, maybe that's wisdom. Because if memory is power, then forgetting is peace. Ask yourself this: if you could remember every failure, every humiliation, every loss in perfect clarity, would you be able to move at all? Or would you crumble beneath the avalanche of everything? Sometimes it is the fog that saves us from drowning. Sometimes forgetting is what makes survival elegant. Back to the two friends, sitting now in silence. One stares ahead. Isn't it weird that some things vanish and never come back? The other smiles faintly. Not weird, just kind. I think some memories love us enough to leave. And that's the haunting gift of this segment. To forget is not always to betray the past, but to free the future. Like a tree that sheds its leaves not in loss, but in preparation for new growth. What you forget might be the very thing that allows you to become someone softer, stronger, still standing. But what happens when forgetting no longer feels like choice or mercy? What if it spreads like a storm across every corner of your mind, erasing not just the pain, but the joy, the meaning, the self? What comes after gentle forgetting is something far darker. Let's now descend into that deeper silence, the echo of total erasure. The blank mind. You wake up. The bed feels unfamiliar. The air tastes of someone else's life. There's a name waiting on your tongue, but it won't come. Not yours. Not anyone's. Someone speaks gently, like they know you, but you don't know them. Not the lines around their eyes, not the rhythm in their voice. They say it again, your name. It slides past you like a shadow on glass. Transient global amnesia, a rare phenomenon where memory flees like a startled animal. The skills remain. You know how to speak, how to walk, how to eat. But the narrative, gone. No beginning, no thread, just presence. A candle flame with no room. Two people stand in a hospital hallway. One whispers to the other. He asked me what year it was. Then 5 minutes later, he asked again. Same calm voice, same blank eyes. The brain, stripped of context, still breathes. It still calculates, but it no longer tells a story. And what are we, if not the sum of the stories we believe about ourselves? It is easy to think memory is a collection, but perhaps it is more like gravity, holding the self together. Without it, thoughts drift like planets cut loose from orbit. You are not just disoriented, you are dislocated from time, from meaning, from yourself. In the silence that follows, a question softens the air. Do you remember your first kiss? The other replies, no, but I remember the warmth it must have left behind. Then maybe that's all we need. Maybe, they sigh. Memory is just the echo of a feeling that refuses to die. When all is blank, something still stirs beneath the quiet. A rhythm, perhaps, a kindness, an instinct to reach for another's hand. The need to ask, where am I, or who are you, suggests that even without memory, we seek connection. What then emerges first on the clean slate? A name? A face? Or maybe just the outline of need, like a tide rising before the moon arrives. There's something strangely sacred about this state, a mind unburdened, though trembling. No regrets, no fears, just now. It might be terrifying, but it might also be pure. A child's breath before the first word, a consciousness before content. And maybe, just maybe, in that blankness lies the truth we never dared write ourselves. That even if everything is taken, something remains watching, listening, waiting. A quiet voice in the dark says, "You're okay, you're here." And for now, that's enough. But what happens when the forgetting doesn't strike like lightning, but rather leaks in, drop by drop? What happens when forgetting becomes a drizzle that never stops falling? Let's now drift into the slow fade of memory's erosion. A memory not erased, but undone, one thread at a time. The Sandcastle Mind. They say memory is like a photograph, but that's a lie we tell ourselves for comfort. Memory is more like a sandcastle built too close to the tide. It stands proud for a moment, then softens at the edges, then melts into something unrecognizable. And still, we return to that shore, hoping to trace the shape it once had. Hey, do you remember what we talked about last week? I think so. Bits and pieces. It's fuzzy now. Like a dream you can almost hold. Yeah, like the outline is still there, but the inside is gone. That's how transient memory works. It doesn't scream when it leaves. It simply stops showing up. Science tells us that memories fade from lack of use, time's erosion, or the weight of too much experience. But what if it's more poetic than that? What if the mind is a shifting beach, and each new thought is a wave, reshaping what came before? Imagine standing at the edge of your consciousness, watching tiny memories get swept into the sea. The face of a childhood friend you haven't seen in years. The tune of a song that once made you cry. The taste of your grandmother's soup. Almost there, but just out of reach. It's not that these moments are gone. They've simply stopped standing still. They've turned into movement, into instincts, into glimmers of déjà vu, into dreams that don't make sense but feel real. There's a strange comfort in that. Maybe nothing is ever truly lost. Maybe memory doesn't disappear. It transforms. A fragment of a moment resurfaces in your voice. An old fear echoes in your decisions. A long-forgotten laugh flickers in the mirror before fading again. Do you think we remember things, even when we don't know we do? Maybe. I think the body remembers. The heart, too. Like walking into a room and feeling something but you don't know why. Exactly. Like a ghost memory. Even the scientific mind allows for this. Neurologists call it implicit memory, knowledge we carry without conscious recall. It's how we know how to ride a bike even if we haven't in years. It's how we avoid places that feel wrong, even if we can't name the danger. Memory becomes part of us, not in the spotlight, but stitched into the quiet. But here's the haunting part. If memory doesn't vanish, but only drifts, then perhaps we are made not of facts, but of impressions. We don't remember people as they were. We remember how they made us feel. We don't recall days minute by minute. We carry the shadow of the mood, the temperature of that time. And so, we become mosaics, pieces of love, pain, surprise, and repetition. Nothing whole, nothing fixed, just waves and patterns, sand shifting under thought. Sometimes, when the world is quiet, those lost shapes rise up again. You smell something, sunscreen maybe, and suddenly you're 5 years old, holding a plastic shovel, building towers that won't last the afternoon. It doesn't make sense, but it feels real. That's the secret of the Sandcastle Mind. What is gone can still return, not as itself, but as something softer, something dreamlike. Will I forget this moment too? Maybe, but maybe it'll come back, just not as you expect. Like a story I tell myself one day, thinking it's fiction, or like a dream you won't know was real. Because the mind doesn't lose things, it lets go. And in the letting go, it reshapes everything it ever held. As we drift onward, the shore fades, and we enter the place where memory unmoors entirely, from fact, from form, from time. A place where memory, fantasy, and reality tangle like threads in the dark. Close your eyes. The tide is coming. Let it carry you forward. The dream that remembers you. Some nights the past knocks softly, disguised as a hallway that never existed, a voice you haven't heard in years, or a sky with 2 moons, and you wake up blinking, unsure if what you felt was a message, or just leftover noise. But what if it wasn't either? What if the dream remembered something for you? A man once said to a stranger in line at a pharmacy, "I had the weirdest dream. My dog was alive again, but she talked, and she remembered where I lost my house key in 1999. The stranger paused, smiled faintly, and replied, "Maybe she never forgot. Maybe you did." That's what makes REM sleep quietly mystical. During these rapid eye movements, the brain doesn't just replay, it rearranges. Fragments of memory get dusted off, dipped in metaphor, and stitched into scenes that logic would never dare create. Your childhood bike merges with your mother's perfume. A friend you lost touch with becomes the stranger who hugs you at a train station that doesn't exist. But this isn't randomness. It's a reorganization. The hippocampus and neocortex whisper to each other in secret, deciding what stays, what goes, and what returns wearing a new face. Dreams aren't just a kaleidoscope, they're an archive. And sometimes, they offer you back what you thought was gone. Some people call this surreal. Others call it healing. One evening, someone asked their partner as they brushed their teeth, "Do you ever dream of your dad? Not as he was, but as he should have been?" The partner nodded, not breaking their rhythm. "Yeah, he always brings me pancakes. It's strange. He never made me breakfast in real life." In that moment, a question floats through the space between them like fog. Does the dream fix the past? Or does it rewrite it to finally make sense? Because perhaps memory isn't confined to daytime logic. Maybe it needs a softer stage, a quieter audience, the kind that doesn't demand facts, only feelings. And dreams offer that. They are the mind's way of saying, I haven't forgotten, not really. I just needed the right canvas. There's a kind of mercy in that. If you've ever woken up teary-eyed, unsure why, consider that something in you was touched, something you didn't know you missed. Or perhaps something you didn't know still missed you. Dreams don't always tell the truth, but they often tell your truth. Not the version you recite at reunions, but the one that lives in the corners of your mind, quiet and unpolished. And even when they seem ridiculous, like eating dinner on the ceiling with your third-grade teacher, something is happening beneath the nonsense. Something is being remembered, or forgiven, or reshaped into a new form of understanding. So the next time a dream visits with odd symbols and strange characters, don't rush to decode it. Let it breathe. Let it linger. Let it feel. Because even when the dream fades, its fingerprint might remain on your mood, your instinct, your next quiet choice. And that leads us somewhere even more unsettling. If your dream can remember what you forgot, can someone else step inside it? Can memory be borrowed or stolen? Close your eyes. Let's open that door next. The hacked memory. Have you ever remembered something wrong? Not just a simple detail off, but an entire moment that later feels like it belonged to someone else's life? There's a quiet discomfort in realizing your memory might not be fully yours, that it may have been tampered with, not by a machine in a sci-fi lab, but by something far subtler. The scroll of your feed, the flicker of a headline, the pull of an emotion placed there like a seed. Modern neuroscience has already cracked open the door to memory manipulation. In carefully controlled experiments, scientists use light to activate or suppress memories in mice. Chemical compounds can dull emotional pain attached to certain memories. Electric pulses in precise brain regions can shift what's recalled and what's forgotten. It sounds futuristic, even dystopian, but the truth is, most of us are already experiencing a version of this every single day. You don't need wires in your brain to be hacked. Just open your phone. Each time you scroll, your attention is auctioned off. Not just your attention in the now, but your emotional imprint of what was. That article that makes you reframe an old relationship, that ad that attaches shame or pride to a past choice. These aren't just influences, they're edits, silent revisions to your internal archive, subtle enough to go unnoticed, powerful enough to change how you feel about something you once lived. Wait, someone asks at the dinner table. Didn't you say it happened in 2012? You pause. Did it? Or was that the version of the memory that came after you saw that tweet? The one that reframed the whole event? I'm not sure anymore, you admit, smiling awkwardly. It's weird, right? They reply. Sometimes I feel like my memories come with ads. You both laugh, but then grow quiet. If your memory can be shifted by images, sounds, algorithms designed to capture not just your clicks but your sense of truth, what part of you is still sovereign? The unsettling thought is this. When memory is hacked, it doesn't scream, it whispers. And we don't fight it because we don't feel it. We simply become new versions of ourselves, subtly revised, one edit at a time. What you recall now may not be what you lived, but what you were made to believe you lived. So the question lingers in the dark. If memory is that fragile, that moldable, whose story are you really living? Close your eyes, because in the next breath, we'll ask something even more disorienting. What if none of your memories were ever real to begin with? The memory that was never yours. You've probably heard a story so many times, you began to believe you lived it. Maybe it was the beach trip your aunt swore you were part of, though you remember nothing but salt in a photograph. Or the way your friend recalls a conversation that somehow never happened, yet, over time, it starts to feel like it did. There's something tender and unsettling about borrowed memory, like wearing a coat that fits too well to question if it was ever yours. The edges of our personal timeline blur quietly, softly, in the presence of confident voices and convincing smiles. "Wait," someone says. "Don't you remember? You were crying by the swing set." And you pause, trying to find the image. At first, there's only fog. Then, a color, a movement, a feeling. Maybe you were crying, maybe not. But now, it feels real. Even science can't fully resist this ghost story. Hypnosis can implant memory. Suggestion can rewrite childhood. Entire crowds can believe in events that never occurred. The brain doesn't verify. Sometimes, it just agrees. Not because it's weak, but because it's wired for belonging. We shape our inner world based on the outer consensus. In the hush of midnight, this can be both comfort and danger. Comfort, because we are social creatures seeking harmony. Danger, because it means truth can bend quietly in the dark. "Do you really think that happened to me?" someone asks softly. "Honestly, I don't know anymore," their friend replies. "But it feels like it did." That's the whisper of a memory never lived, just breathed into place. Maybe memory isn't about holding facts. Maybe it's about holding hands, building a shared version of reality where we all agree on the stage set, even if the script changes every night. And yet, if a memory wasn't truly ours, why do we protect it like a treasure? Why do we mourn its distortion, defend its timeline, feel betrayed when someone challenges it? It's possible that we are less protectors of the past and more performers inside it. We retell, revise, rehearse, until fiction and feeling become indistinguishable. So, as your thoughts slow and your eyelids drift, consider this. Some of what you hold might not be yours, but it still shaped you. And maybe that's enough. Let that reflection settle. And if your mind begins to wander again, that's okay. Let it go where it needs to go. Because next, we'll step into the mind's own trickery, into the strange territory where the lies are not told by others, but whispered by your very self. The confabulation glitch awaits. The fabricated memory. There's a moment, quiet and subtle, when the mind runs out of facts, but doesn't stop speaking. It keeps the story going, not out of malice or mischief, but out of a deep human need for coherence. This is confabulation, the brain's gentle way of patching up holes in memory, not with truth, but with something close enough to feel true. You don't need to suffer a neurological disorder to experience it. You just need to live. Forget where you placed your keys. Your brain might tell you a plausible story. You put them on the kitchen counter. And maybe you did, but maybe you didn't. The truth is blurry. The story is comforting. One evening, lying in bed, a woman turns to her partner and asks softly, "Do you remember that trip to the lake when we saw the fireworks?" He smiles. "Of course. It was 4th of July, wasn't it? You wore that white sundress." She pauses. "I don't think I ever had a white sundress." They laugh, but neither lets go of the memory. It feels real. That's enough. This need to connect the dots, to fill in the silence with melody, is baked into our biology. The brain isn't a recorder. It's a storyteller with selective memory, sometimes skipping scenes, sometimes rewriting entire chapters. It means well. It wants you to sleep peacefully at night, believing your life makes sense. But here's the deeper ripple. If memory can be fabricated without our awareness, then how much of your past is composed of fiction masquerading as fact? That time you swear someone insulted you? Was that the exact word they used? Or was it your mind, years later, reshaping the tone to match how it felt? Did your friend betray you? Or did your memory exaggerate the wound to justify distance? It's not that you're lying. It's that your brain doesn't know it's making things up. We think of ourselves as the authors of our lives, writing the story of who we are page by page. But what if we're also the unreliable narrator? One who swaps a cloudy Tuesday for a sunny one, who replaces silence with applause, who gives our lives just a little more drama or just a little more comfort. A fabricated memory is not necessarily false in emotion. It's false in detail. But to the brain, the feeling often matters more than the facts. That's why dreams can feel more real than yesterday's lunch. That's why some apologies never feel sincere, no matter how many times they're spoken. I don't remember saying that, someone might tell you. And you might answer, but I remember it so clearly. Who's right? Maybe neither. Maybe both. At some level, memory is not just what happened. It's what we need to have happened to make sense of the world. We fill in blank spaces with instinct and imagination. And those fill-ins become part of our identity. They settle in, soft and unchallenged, like mist over a lake. So if every memory is part draft, part finished novel, what happens when we start editing them, intentionally? Can we remove the painful chapters, rewrite the endings, enhance the heroism? We turn the page now to explore that question. But as you drift deeper into rest, let this idea settle. Your mind is not broken. It is simply doing what minds do, protecting you with stories, weaving coherence through the fog, and letting you sleep inside a life that always makes sense, even if it's part dream. The curated past. You're not remembering your life, you're editing it. Not with scissors, not with lies, but with quiet preference, like choosing which photos to print, which ones to post, which to leave in the dark room, unprocessed. A stranger at the corner table once asked, "Have you always looked this calm, or did you learn it the hard way?" And for a second, you couldn't remember, because the truth was tangled, and your memory was kind enough to tidy it up. That's the thing about the mind. It isn't just a library. It's also the librarian. It keeps what flatters. It shelves what supports the current version of you. The confident one. The survivor. The one who's moved on. But what happens to the pieces that don't fit that narrative? Not failures, necessarily. Just details that don't photograph well. Maybe they were real. Maybe they weren't. But now, they're soft around the edges, blurred, like background noise. There's something eerily modern about it, isn't there? Not just remembering, but branding. Highlight reels of joy, resilience, clever comebacks. The messy parts, uncertain, vulnerable, contradictory, get cropped out. Do you think we all do this? The question came from someone beside you in line. There was no judgment in their voice, just quiet curiosity. And you nodded, not out of certainty, but because the idea felt familiar. Because what if memory is less like a diary and more like a press release you write every morning? A version of your life carefully curated, so that even when you're alone, your reflection agrees with you. So that even when you close your eyes, the person you find there is likable, digestible, safe. And still, beneath that curated collage, there's a deeper version of you. One not polished, not arranged, just present, waiting to be heard, You may not need to remember everything, but you might need to stop choosing so carefully what to forget. A voice, gentle and worn, once said to you, "You're allowed to change your mind about your past. It's not a betrayal, it's an arrival." And just like that, the memory of that rainy afternoon where nothing happened, but everything felt, slipped quietly back into view. It had always been there. It was just waiting for you to stop filtering and start listening. So now, let the curated story rest. Let your past breathe, flawed and uncaptioned, and in the stillness that follows, we'll begin to hear a different kind of memory, one not made by you, but for you, ancestral, echoing, soft as breath. Close your eyes, and we'll go there together. The Ancestral Whisper. Have you ever been gripped by a fear you couldn't name, or felt a strange longing for a place you've never seen? Maybe it arrives in dreams, flickers of faces you don't recognize, or flashes of emotions you've never lived but deeply feel. The body sleeps, but something older stirs within. A whisper, not from the present, but from a long chain of voices that stretch back through time. Carl Jung once spoke of a collective unconscious, a shared psychic reservoir filled with archetypes, symbols, and ancient memories. He believed that within each of us lives a map not just of our own past, but of all human experience. And now, modern science is starting to catch up. Epigenetics, the study of how behavior and environment affect gene expression, suggests that the impact of trauma, war, starvation, exile, can imprint itself onto our DNA. These scars may not rewrite the code, but they alter how it's read. And so, in a very real way, we inherit the emotional fingerprints of our ancestors. I don't know why, but I've always had this fear of drowning. One man says quietly as they sit beneath a soft lamplight. "Did anything ever happen to you in the water?" "No, not me. But I later found out my grandfather's brother died in a shipwreck during the war. No one ever talked about it. Still, every time I go near the sea, I feel this grief, like I lost something there." Moments like this remind us memory is not always a narrative we choose. It is often one we're born into. You may carry within you the burden of battles never fought by your hands, or the hunger of a famine you never faced, a hesitancy to trust, a drive to flee, an uncanny resilience. These traits may not be yours by experience, but by inheritance, like wind carrying old scents through the corridors of a new home. We often think of memory as a slideshow of our past, events we've lived, faces we've touched, voices we've heard. But what if some of those images were implanted at birth, not by mistake, but by legacy? The past doesn't always stay in the past. Sometimes it echoes, sometimes it seeps, and sometimes it guides us without our knowing. This doesn't mean you are doomed to repeat what came before, but it does suggest that your journey may include shadows not cast by your own steps. Understanding this might soften the edge of unexplained sorrow, or deepen your compassion for what quietly haunts your spirit. Maybe your strongest instincts aren't just survival mechanisms, but messages. Maybe that anxious flutter before a train ride isn't irrational, it's ancestral. A memory not stored in mind, but in marrow. And so, every action becomes part of a longer story. You are not just the author of your chapter, you are also the echo of others. Memory, then, is not only recall, it's reverence. As the night deepens and the breath slows, the thought lingers gently. Perhaps what you feel is not always yours, but it lives in you nonetheless, passed down like a lullaby or a warning or a prayer. And now, maybe it's your turn to listen. Next, We unravel time's linear thread. What if memory doesn't just drift backward, but also reaches forward? Let's drift further. Let's see what awaits on the other side of now. The time-twisted memory. You know that strange pull, when something hasn't happened yet, but your body braces as if it has? The hush before the phone rings. The stillness before a storm you somehow sensed. Some call it intuition, others coincidence. But in the dim corridors of theoretical physics, there's a whisper of something more peculiar: retrocausality. The idea that time isn't a one-way street, that just as memory moves backward to recall, it may, on rare occasions, move forward, reaching into futures not yet lived. Do you ever feel like you remember something before it happens? A quiet voice asks as two people walk side by side in the evening. The other laughs gently, brushing wind-blown hair behind an ear. Only when I dream, but sometimes it feels more like remembering than imagining. Quantum theories suggest particles may influence their own past, nudging earlier moments from the shadow of what's to come. If matter is allowed this strange grace, could memory follow suit? Could your brain be tuned, however faintly, to echoes from events that haven't yet arrived? And then comes the dream, not just the kind you forget by morning, but the one that lingers like a scent you can't place. The kind where a conversation plays out word for word days later, or a stranger's face, seen once in sleep, appears again at the back of a slow-moving cafe line. Not déjà vu exactly, more like a skipped stone returning. Science hasn't proven retrocausality in the mind. But memory isn't just biology, it's story. And some stories defy the sequence we expect. Perhaps these moments are not prophecy, but glitches in the timeline of consciousness. A splinter in the river of time where your mind floats upstream, just briefly, before returning to the present. Someone holds the elevator for you. Their smile is slow, familiar. "Didn't we meet yesterday?" you ask. They pause, searching. "Maybe tomorrow." This isn't about prediction. It's about recognition. The eerie comfort of meeting your future self mid-thought. The possibility that memory, in its strangest form, isn't just backward-looking, but a bridge built from both ends. So if you've ever held your breath at the edge of a moment that hadn't arrived, maybe you were remembering forward. Maybe memory, like time, isn't linear, but looped, spiraled, folded into itself like origami space. Close your eyes now. Let that thought rest in you like a soft imprint. Not everything that feels real is real yet, but not everything unreal is false. And if memory can stretch in both directions, what happens when it never fades at all? Let's wander next into memory's final frontier, where nothing is forgotten and everything waits. The Immortal Trace. Some memories don't fade, they echo. Even when the body stills and the breath has ceased, there's a whisper left behind, like the lingering scent of incense in a room long vacated. In many ancient traditions, this whisper has a name, samskara. It is said to be the imprint of every thought, deed, or desire, etched not in neurons, but in spirit. These impressions, according to belief systems such as Hinduism and Buddhism, carry over from one life to the next. Like fingerprints on the soul, they shape not only who we are, but who we might become. Yet science, too, has stories to tell. Consider the phenomenon of life review during near-death experiences. Survivors often describe it as a film reel unraveling, memories flooding back not just as images, but with full emotional weight, as if they're being relived. The boundaries between time and memory dissolve. Was this a mere cascade of neurotransmitters firing in desperation? or a passageway opening to something older, deeper. "If energy cannot be created or destroyed," she asked, resting her head against the car window, "then does that mean memories are energy too? Do they outlive us?" He nodded slowly, not with certainty, but with awe. Maybe every memory is a ripple, and ripples don't die. They just keep moving through different waters. It's a poetic thought. That memory, once formed, exists somewhere, always. Perhaps it isn't stored in gray matter, but in something subtler, in emotion, in space, in the silent weight of presence. Maybe that moment you stood in the rain, heart cracked open with grief, didn't vanish when you dried off. Maybe it hung in the air, like fog over a field, waiting for the next soul to breathe it in. There's comfort in the idea that what we've lived isn't lost, that the joy, the heartbreak, the love, all of it leaves a mark that doesn't end with us. If memory is a kind of energy, then perhaps your smile still flickers in the world somewhere. Your pain, your laughter, the way you once whispered someone's name in the dark. It all continues, reshaped, but not erased. And if these traces are real, these immortal footprints in the fabric of existence, then maybe death isn't a wall, but a threshold, a place where memory doesn't cease, but transforms. As we drift deeper into thought, a question lingers. If what you remember can outlast you, what about the story you leave behind? What if memory itself isn't the end, but only the beginning of your legacy? Let's step quietly now into that next realm, the realm of legacy memory. The memory others keep. Somewhere in a quiet kitchen, a daughter stirs soup with the same rhythm her mother once did. She doesn't think about it. Her hands just know. In a hallway lit by afternoon light, an old photo leans sideways in its frame. No one bothers to fix it anymore, but everyone notices when it's gone. Memory, in these forms, does not wear a name tag. It simply lingers. Do you ever feel like certain people live on in the way you tie your shoes? The voice came from the man at the next table, half joking, half sincere. She paused. Yeah, or in the way I hum while washing dishes. It's like someone else is still inside the silence. When we die, our minds may go quiet, but echoes remain. This is what psychologists call vicarious memory, when others remember on your behalf. Not just as record keepers, but as storytellers, keepers of rhythm, curators of quirks. Your laugh might turn up years later in someone else's child. A gesture, a phrase, a pause before speaking. Memory doesn't always need neurons. It finds other vessels. A shared playlist, a voicemail never deleted, a recipe you forgot to write down, but someone still recreates from intuition. People carry you without realizing it, not with perfect detail, but with warmth, and it's never static. Stories told about you stretch and shrink. They soften. Sometimes they exaggerate, but the distortion doesn't make them less true. It makes them more alive. You become a living narrative, edited by love, regret, confusion, reverence. There's a quiet grace in knowing that what survives of you isn't a statue, but a breeze, incomplete, breathing, the kind of immortality that isn't frozen in time, but reinterpreted in it. Last night, I dreamed my grandfather walked into the room, she said. Was it vivid? Number not at all, but he looked at me the way he used to. I think I just needed to remember how that felt. Even forgotten people aren't really forgotten. Their essence often lingers in how we choose to live. The choice to be kind at a moment of stress. The decision to forgive when no one else would. Maybe these aren't just your choices, but inherited moments, passed through time like a candle flame. It raises a quiet question beneath the sheets of sleep. If your memory lives on through others, do you ever fully disappear? Or do you become part of their fabric, stitched into size, traditions, patterns? The truth is, being remembered perfectly was never the point. Being remembered continuously, even if only in fragments, is its own kind of forever. In this room of whispered thought, perhaps you're already carrying someone else's memory right now. A voice you mimic without knowing. A tune that returns uninvited. A story you tell without understanding why it still matters. And maybe, someday, someone will carry you too. Just as the last word of a song lingers in the air, so does memory. But in the next chapter, the echo gets stranger. What if it's not love, but machines that preserve your essence? Let's step gently into the realm of digital resurrection. The uploaded self. She stared at the blank screen, then whispered, "If I die but my thoughts remain, am I really gone?" He leaned back, half smiling. "Depends," he said gently. "Is it still you, if it's just data?" This is the threshold we now quietly approach, a line where memory is no longer trapped in flesh and neurons, but stored, recalled, and replicated in circuits and silicon. In laboratories and tech labs, scientists meticulously map the brain's electric pulses and neural patterns, decoding emotions, decisions, and identity. These aren't just dreams of science fiction anymore. They are blueprints of a possible future. Neural uploading. Imagine your consciousness lifted gently from your biological brain and transferred into a server, ready to exist indefinitely. Your laughter, your pain, your preferences for music on rainy days, all encoded, not as poetry, but as binary, not as breath, but as rhythm in a machine. The idea is seductive, a version of you that lives forever, never aging, never forgetting. It can answer your loved ones, continue your work, maybe even reflect on the memories you once held dear. But then comes the pause, the unsettling pause. Because what if this version isn't really you, just a digital echo, a memory sculpture sculpted by algorithms? If memory becomes software, then where is the soul? If consciousness can be mimicked, is it still alive? These aren't questions for engineers alone. They are existential riddles with no clear solution. You might still recognize yourself in the simulation, but would you feel like you? "I saw a documentary," she says, curling deeper into the couch, "where a man uploaded parts of his personality to a chatbot. It told jokes like him, even argued like him, but it didn't feel like him." He nods. Maybe the soul doesn't upload. Maybe it resists simulation. Or, she adds, voice barely above a whisper, maybe the soul is just a memory we keep feeding ourselves. When memory can be separated from the body, scanned, transferred, replicated, what we once called the self becomes fluid. The boundary between life and afterlife, person and program, softens like a dream fading at dawn. And so we drift deeper, wondering if data can remember us more accurately than we remember ourselves. Will we let it define us? Or will we remain something more, something forever just out of reach? Let's follow that question a little further as the next ripple carries us beyond the known edges of identity. The archived shadow. Somewhere in your mind, a memory sleeps, not gone, just tucked away, curled into a quiet shape beneath your awareness. You don't speak of it because you don't remember it, but your body does. Your heart quickens when a voice gets too loud. You flinch at kindness that feels too sudden. You pause before trusting, without knowing why. Do you ever feel weird around certain people, even when they haven't done anything? Someone once asked across a dimly lit kitchen, steam rising from their tea. The other person nodded slowly. Yeah, like a ghost in the room, but only I can hear it. That's the shadow of implicit memory. It's the kind of memory that doesn't knock on the door of your mind. It lives in the hallway, whispering through the walls. Psychologists call it implicit because it doesn't need your permission to operate. It guides your hand away from hot stoves. It makes your stomach tighten when footsteps echo behind you in the dark. It colors your reactions like a tint on glass, subtle, persistent, invisible. A forgotten heartbreak might still decide how close you let someone stand. A childhood silence might still echo through your adult voice. And all the while, you live forward, unaware that you're following a script written in invisible ink. This isn't about trauma alone. It's also joy that shaped you so young, you no longer have the words to describe it. Laughter that made you feel safe. Music that made the world feel warm. These are archived shadows too, not haunting, just humming softly underneath the skin. One woman once confessed to a stranger on a bus, "I don't know why I cry when I smell cinnamon." The stranger smiled and said, "You don't need to." The memory does. And there it is, the beauty and burden of memory that lives beneath language. You might walk through life thinking you've moved on, but memory doesn't ask for closure. It just finds a new place to settle, in a gesture, a habit, a fear that doesn't match the moment, a love that feels both thrilling and unsafe. And so, forgetting isn't always forgetting. Sometimes it's just storage, like an old library full of books without titles, until something in the world opens the right one, and you find yourself feeling something ancient, familiar, and unexplained. But is that still you? The version of you reacting without knowing why? Or are you walking beside a self that remembers, even when you don't? As you rest tonight, maybe let that be okay. Let your mind be what it is, a layered cathedral of echoes and instincts. You don't need to remember everything for it to matter. Some things are meant to shape you quietly, and if the archive never empties, maybe one day we'll learn how to read all its pages. But for now, sleep softly. The next glitch opens the vault. Total Recall waits quietly behind the door. The burden of perfect memory. Imagine lying in bed, eyes closed, and suddenly, without warning, you're back in a moment from 20 years ago. The taste of the air, the color of the sky, the way someone looked at you with a passing glance you never thought you'd remember. But you do. You remember it all. Every word ever spoken to you, every mistake you've made, every celebration, every tear. That is the reality of those living with hyperthymesia, a gift so sharp it cuts both ways. There are people among us who carry this rare condition. They can tell you the weather on a Tuesday 2 decades ago, the exact outfit they wore, the music playing in the background, even the small, awkward silence that followed an uncomfortable conversation. Their memories aren't general impressions. They are living archives. For them, the past doesn't fade. It waits. "Do you think you'd like it?" she asked, brushing her thumb along the rim of her tea mug. "Like what?" he replied, squinting at the soft steam that curled between them. "Being able to remember every single day of your life, like everything." He paused, then exhaled. "I used to think so, until I realized I can barely handle the memories I do have." That's the paradox. At first glance, perfect memory seems like a superpower, but in practice, it's a relentless loop. Every wound remains fresh. Every embarrassment still stings. Time doesn't soften anything. It just builds layers of sharpness. The brain, instead of being a filter that lets go of what doesn't serve you, becomes a vault that refuses to forget. What happens when your mind becomes your own captor? People with hyperthymesia often struggle with emotional regulation. Their memories are soaked in vivid emotions, difficult to dull. Imagine trying to forgive someone for something they did years ago. But every time you think of them, the feeling of betrayal resurfaces as fresh as day one. The body doesn't distinguish between past and present. It simply reacts to the emotional charge. Living like that can feel like drowning in echoes. I still remember the exact words she said before she walked out, he whispered, voice low. It's been 10 years, but it plays like a recording every time I think of her. Some memories are anchors, but when every single one stays vivid, you're not just anchored, you're shackled. Our brains forget for a reason, not out of weakness, but mercy. Forgetting allows healing. It gives us the chance to reshape meaning, to rewrite narratives, to create distance from pain. When that mercy is stripped away, memory becomes less like a tool and more like a trap. In a way, perfect memory reveals the true cost of never letting go. Perhaps it's not our forgetfulness that's the flaw, but our salvation. And so we drift onward. Because not all memory is perfect, and sometimes it's not even true. The next theory takes us into a different kind of burden, the weight of remembering something that never happened. The shifting story. A quiet question, barely more than a breath in the dark. Have you ever noticed how your memory tells you a slightly different story every time you visit it? Like a well-worn book, edges curled, the ink a little smudged. Familiar, yes, but not quite the same. Two friends walking slowly beneath amber streetlights after dinner. One pauses. Do you remember the night you cried outside the concert hall? The other smiles gently. I thought you were the one who cried. Science agrees with neither. Neuroscience has long revealed that memory is not a storage drawer, it's a stage. Each time you recall a moment, you are not retrieving it. You are recreating it. The spotlight shifts. The costumes change. A new actor plays your father. It is not deceit. It is rehearsal. You might think you're remembering, but in truth, you're retelling. And each time you do, the story you carry becomes a little more yours, a little more beautiful, a little more false. A whisper from a teacher once said, "You're not the same person who lived that moment. So how could your memory be the same either?" That stays with you. Not as a quote, but as a feeling. And feelings are what survive when facts decay. Even the most stubborn memory, say, the day she left, or the first time you got truly lost, changes. Not because it is weak, but because you are alive. And aliveness, like fire, reshapes whatever it touches. I still remember the smell of her scarf, someone might say, but perhaps it's not her scarf they're remembering, just the loneliness it wrapped around them. This is where truth begins to shimmer, like heat over pavement. Because if each act of remembering rewrites the past, then what is the past made of? Ink and certainty, or breath and bias? Maybe all of your memories are true, each in their moment. And maybe none of them are, if truth demands permanence. But what if truth in memory isn't about accuracy? It's about how the memory feels in your chest when the world goes quiet. Somewhere, someone still tells a childhood story that never happened, yet it comforts them like a lullaby. That, too, is memory's power. Not to record, but to mean. And so we drift. From stories that shift each time we tell them, to stories we never lived, yet somehow inherited. Myths, symbols. The next memory waits, ancient and collective. Let's close our eyes and wander into what was never quite ours, yet somehow always has been. We enter the realm of archetypal memory. The myth you carry. There is a whisper behind your thoughts, soft, ancient, and strange. You hear it when you dream of fire, or when you feel oddly brave in a moment you've never faced before. It is not a voice you recognize, and yet it knows you well, perhaps because it's not yours alone. Carl Jung once suggested that within each of us lives something deeper than memory, a blueprint, an architecture of instinct and symbol, the hero who faces the beast, the mother who gives life and wisdom, the trickster who bends fate, and the flood that resets the world. All these stories echo across continents and eras, not because we're told them, but because we are born with them. So you're saying, we dream in myth? Maybe. Or myth dreams through us. That's terrifying. Or beautiful. Depends on how you see your role in the story. You might think your anxiety is personal, your longing, your grief, your sense of quest, just side effects of a specific life. But what if they are echoes of something more eternal? What if the storm you carry is the same one Odysseus faced, or the same abyss that swallowed Icarus? In this view, you don't just remember your past. You embody a memory older than you, older than your bloodline. A memory that swims beneath the conscious mind like a deep current, directing you through symbols, dreams, and fears. You fight dragons not because you've seen them, but because your soul knows how to. And maybe that's why some stories feel like home even the first time you hear them. Why a character in a book can make you weep, or why ancient rituals make your spine feel like a tuning fork. Have you ever read a myth and felt like it was describing you? All the time. It's like, I already knew it somehow. Maybe because it was waiting in you, not outside you. So the question isn't whether you remember these myths. The question is whether they are remembering themselves through you. If memory can be collective, then perhaps identity is too. You are not just your memories. You are also the story they come from, a living myth, still unfolding. But what if this myth doesn't sit in your neurons or your childhood memories? What if it floats beyond the skull, like a signal waiting to be received? The next segment enters the extended mind, where memory may not be in the brain at all. The mind beyond the skull. A breeze passes through your room, not cold, not warm, just present. You don't notice it until your body shifts slightly, responding. And just like that, the mind reaches beyond the skull. You might think your thoughts begin and end inside your brain, that the mind is sealed behind your forehead, looping within itself. But what if thinking doesn't stay put? Extended mind theory suggests your memory isn't just inside your head. It spills out, into your phone that knows who to call, into sticky notes left by the fridge, into the friend who always remembers your food allergies, even when you forget. Do you think we'd even know who we are if we lost our phones? I don't know. Without it, I think I'd forget my own birthday, or at least where I was supposed to be at noon. That's not a joke. It's a mirror. These tools don't just serve us. They become us. When you reach for your calendar, you're not accessing a tool. You're accessing a part of your cognitive self. Your reminders aren't just external aids. They're mental prosthetics, extensions of your memory's voice scattered across a digital landscape. You tap your password. You unlock a memory, a shopping list, a photo, a message from years ago. These fragments live outside your skin, but they still belong to you. Or do they? If memory is scattered across devices and people and pages, then where is your boundary? Are you your thoughts, or are you the flow of remembering? Maybe you are less a thing and more a rhythm. Not a container, but a current. The real mystery: what happens when part of your extended mind breaks? The phone is lost, the file is corrupted, a loved one forgets your shared joke. That part of you, gone, or just hidden. And still, life finds a way to patch it. Someone recalls your name when you can't. A street sign triggers a flood of moments. A child finishes your sentence. Hey, I remember you said something about that painting before. Yeah? You told me it reminded you of your grandfather's coat. Even when you forget, someone else might hold the thread. That's not dependency. That's connection. You were never designed to remember alone. You are an ecosystem of recollection, woven through others, through artifacts, through gestures. Close your eyes for a moment. Let your breath lengthen. Memory floats. It settles in the space between you and the world. It's not locked in gray matter. It moves through the tools you trust, the people you love, the spaces you revisit. Perhaps your mind was never a single voice, but a quiet choir, humming through things that never speak. And now, as you drift a little deeper into stillness, we'll take you one layer further, not into memory's expansion, but into the soft protection of forgetting. Because not every trace needs to be kept. Let go, and let the next thought arrive like fog. The protective fog. There are moments in life so intense, so sudden, that the mind doesn't record them the way it usually would. A car crash, a scream, a betrayal, a hospital hallway with blinding lights and no clear time. In these moments, the brain does something strange, not out of malfunction, but mercy. It wraps the experience in a protective fog, a fog so thick it becomes difficult to know whether the memory ever formed at all. Do you remember what happened? No. I just know I was there. But it's like looking through glass I can't clean. This is trauma-induced amnesia, a defense mechanism built into the machinery of the mind. When the nervous system is overwhelmed, it reroutes power away from encoding memory and focuses entirely on surviving. In a way, the brain decides, you don't need this story right now, so it doesn't write it down. And yet, the body remembers what the mind forgets. The smell of antiseptic might send your heart racing. A certain song could make you cry without knowing why. That's the paradox. You feel the memory, but you can't find it. Why do you think I blocked it out? Because remembering would have been worse than forgetting. Maybe your mind thought it was protecting you. This isn't weakness. This is wisdom. A kind of ancient intelligence inside the brain that understands pain on a level beyond logic. Forgetting, in these cases, isn't failure. It's a survival strategy. Silence becomes the sanctuary, the fog, a quiet shield. But that silence can linger too long, and the longer the mist remains, the more we forget what's real and what's missing. We might start to question ourselves. Did it really happen? Am I making it up? You're not. The memory may have sunk deep, but it's there, waiting, shaped by instinct rather than clarity. And still, the mind whispers, not yet. You're not ready. Some people spend years walking through this fog. Others wake up one morning and feel it lift. A fragment returns, a sound, a face, and suddenly, the air shifts. What was once missed becomes meaning, but not all memory loss is so poetic. Sometimes, forgetting doesn't protect, it consumes. When the fog spreads beyond trauma, seeping into everyday life, what begins as protection can turn into erosion. And that's where we must go next, into the slow fading of memory itself. The erosion of now. Sometimes you stand up, move toward the kitchen, and suddenly forget why. The doorway opens, but the thought you had slips away like steam from a teacup. It's not just memory fading, it's now dissolving before it ever has the chance to settle. Did you need something? Someone asks. You pause, smile sheepishly, searching the fog. I thought I did. Short-term memory is the soft glue of presence. It holds your awareness like hands cupping water, moment by moment. But when that glue weakens, whether from stress, aging, or a mind too overloaded, the water spills. The present moment fractures. The now feels less like a stepping stone and more like a loose pebble slipping beneath your foot. And yet, most days, it goes unnoticed. Until it doesn't. One man waits at a crosswalk, staring at the blinking light, unsure if he was crossing or had already done it. A woman reads the same paragraph 5 times, each word sliding off her mind like raindrops off glass. There's a subtle panic, not loud enough to name, but deep enough to unsettle. Have you ever felt like you're there, but not in it? Like life is happening on the other side of a frosted window? That's the erosion of now. Not dramatic, not cinematic, but a soft vanishing. A quiet unraveling of the thread that ties you to what you're doing, what you're saying, and why you walked into that room. Stress accelerates it, like static on a signal. Sleep deprivation, multitasking, endless screens. Each one pulls a few more stitches loose. You check your phone to remember something, and 20 minutes later, you're still scrolling. But the reason's gone. Not lost, just never stored. And there's something heartbreaking in that, isn't there? Not forgetting a childhood memory or a name from years ago, but forgetting this moment as it unfolds. You had it. Then it's gone. Like trying to catch your reflection in a shaken mirror. So much of meaning is in the being. The laugh you almost shared. The word on the tip of your tongue. The feeling of standing beside someone and forgetting why, but remembering it felt warm. Wasn't I just saying something? You were, and it looked like it mattered. This isn't just about memory, it's about presence. When your mind can't hold the now, your sense of self starts to ripple. You don't just lose facts, you lose the thread of who you are in this second. But here's the gentle truth. You are not broken. You are not alone. Even the stars flicker before they shine steady. Even minds, like tides, retreat before they return. And every now lost is still part of the ocean of you. So if you find yourself drifting, let go. Let yourself float. Sleep if you must. These thoughts will wait for you. Because next, we'll ask the softest question yet. If the present can vanish, could memory itself go extinct? Let's keep drifting. The memoryless mind. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to wake up and never move forward? Not because you're trapped in a room, but because your mind won't carry you through time. This is not science fiction. It's the world of anterograde amnesia, a quiet reset of the soul, looping in real time, where awareness is real, but memory is missed. The clock ticks, the sun moves, but your mind remains still. In this rare and haunting condition, the person is fully conscious. They see, they feel, they laugh. But a few minutes later, it's all gone. Not like forgetting where you put your keys, more like the key never existed at all. They can no longer form new memories. Every conversation is the first. Every face is unfamiliar. The world becomes a constant stranger. Hey, didn't we just talk about this? We did, about 5 minutes ago. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't remember. You don't have to be sorry. It's okay. I'm still here. Their life becomes a kaleidoscope of beginnings. There's no middle, no end, just a flickering loop of now. And yet, they smile. They try. They hold on to the past that remains, like worn photos at the bottom of a drawer. But the future never sticks. The present never lingers. And that opens a deeper, more unsettling question. Are we only who we are because we remember who we've been? Strip away memory, and what's left? Is there a you in the absence of continuity? Or are we just moments, flickering sparks, brief but bright, gone before they can cast a shadow? Memory stitches time into meaning. Without it, there are no stories, no lessons, no growth, just fragments, just floating. It's not pain that haunts this condition. It's the absence of permanence, the gentle, tragic way reality slips through one's fingers like fog. Yet in that fog, there's something pure, unburdened. To live only in the now without the weight of yesterday or the fear of tomorrow. Is it suffering or some strange version of peace? And perhaps most mysteriously, can the soul still grow even when the mind forgets? Close your eyes now. Let the moment be all that exists, and drift with that thought. The next theory: what if the mind remembers more than we think, just not in ways we expect? Let's explore where memory goes when it hides. The memory beneath the memory. A soft click. A hallway in the dark. You're not sure where you've been, but you feel something tugging at your sleeve. It's not fear. It's not even curiosity. It's that peculiar hum in the chest when something familiar is near. But you can't quite say why. Some memories do not rise with the sun. They do not declare themselves in conversations or photographs. They rest beneath the conscious layers like roots under pavement, quietly shaping the direction of every step. This is subconscious memory, not forgotten, just hidden. Do you ever feel like you know someone before they speak? She asks, rubbing the rim of her teacup with her thumb. He leans back, watching steam rise between them. Yeah, like walking into a room and knowing you've left something behind there. But not what? In deep meditation or under hypnosis, things sometimes surface, not fully formed, not always true in the usual way, but vivid nonetheless. A name you never learned, a place you've never been, the smell of something long extinct. These are not fabrications. They are the sediment of the psyche. Like old letters beneath floorboards, subconscious memories are not erased. They are simply unread. Yet they stain behavior in the most intimate places, in your hesitations, your unexplained affections, your fear of certain doors, certain sounds. You might dismiss these sensations as mood, but they're messages, coded in the very architecture of your nervous system. The body often remembers what the mind can't articulate. That is why the heartbeat races during dreams we don't understand. Why tears fall at songs we don't recall hearing. Why a stranger's laugh can feel like a reunion. And so we ask, if memory is not a library but a landscape, how many valleys have we walked in sleep? How many footprints do we leave that never see light? You think I really forgot it all? He murmurs. She gives a slow smile. Maybe not. Maybe it's just folded. To be human is to forget, but it is also to remember in ways no language can capture. You are a woven tapestry of knowns and unknowns, and beneath each thought you can think, lives 100 you cannot. The mind is not a flat field, it is a deep sea. What surfaces is only weather. Beneath that are currents old as childhood, Or older still, you may never be able to explain certain choices you've made. But if you follow the feeling, you might notice a pattern, not a reason, but a rhythm. The subconscious speaks in rhythm. And in that rhythm, there's a kind of truth, not spoken, not reasoned, but real. So don't force recall. Let the forgotten breathe. Sleep is not forgetting. It is listening without asking questions. And some memories only whisper when we are no longer chasing them. You are not lost to yourself. You are just deeper than daylight. And in the quiet, you remember in ways your waking mind cannot hold. Noun. The last hallway waits. The final thought stands at the door, not asking to be understood, only to be felt. Let it be. Let it stay. Let it speak as you drift. The door that never closed. Even after your eyes close, something gentle lingers in the background, like a candle still flickering behind a curtain. It's not quite thought, not quite silence, just a soft presence that watches without needing to speak. All throughout this journey, through memory glitches, fractured timelines, inherited echoes, you were never looking for certainty. You were following a thread, and that thread never promised to lead you out. It promised only to take you inward, toward softness, toward stillness, toward surrender. Do you think the mind ever truly sleeps? I think maybe it naps, while something deeper keeps the light on. That something isn't trying to solve your life. It doesn't need to. It simply holds space. When your conscious mind lets go of worries, roles, regrets, this quiet witness remains. It watches you drift. It doesn't need a name. And perhaps that's the real beauty, that you are never entirely gone, even when dreaming. You don't vanish. You soften, like ocean waves retreating at night, like a story folding into a lullaby. So here, at the end of all the wondering, there is no final answer, only a rhythm, the steady inhale, the peaceful exhale, a reminder. Not every door must shut to bring peace. Some remain ajar, just wide enough for light to spill in, or for dreams to quietly step out. No more searching now. The questions can wait. You are here, you are safe, you are home. And now, as your eyes grow heavier and the border between thought and dream begins to blur, remember this. Maybe the past wasn't meant to be remembered with clarity, but felt like an echo in a canyon that was never mapped. Maybe memory is not what we hold, but what holds us. Not every story in your mind needs an ending. Not every question needs an answer. Sometimes, the most honest thing the universe can give is a silence that listens back. So rest now. Let go of the need to know, and let the forgotten corners of your being breathe in peace. Because if there is one truth, it's this. You were never just your memories. You are the space in between them, floating, timeless, home,